Yeah, I'm bringing up my
Making
Twitch
sure.
chat now.
Oh, your Twitch chat. Aren't we so fancy? Hello, Twitch chat. I just have a lame YouTube chat. And tonight, assuming I'm live, which it says I am, we're going to be going over a couple of things. I'm thinking maybe we should start with the reaction to the reaction because going over the whole thing is dangerous. Let me just give you a preview of this. Let's do the preview of this to start with and maybe bounce on from there because you'll see what I mean by dangerous. Oh, yeah. Okay, let me also make sure you can listen to this. Tacky Blue, tell me if you can hear this even with. Let me put it on stage, actually. Yeah, that's the thing. Let's see if you can hear this
Can I ask you
without
something?
it
Yes,
being
sir.
visual.
I can hear it.
Since the war in Israel.
Okay, so because of the copyright, you see that. Thanks, Super Bam. I uploaded an edit to it, slightly modified, and it still gave me a strike. So people are being real careful with this. But you don't actually need to see anything. I don't want to do any physical, psychological test tonight. Oh, look at that face Joe Rogan's making. He's got so owned there. You just know all that stuff is a little bit kooky to me. I can understand why it's funny, but that's besides the point. So let's go over some of the questions that I thought would be useful. Thoughts about the whole idea. Are you familiar, Tachyon, with the whole expert, not expert sort of status that Murray is accusing David Smith and a couple of other people like Daryl Cooper, Ian Carroll of having?
So no, I'm not too familiar. I'm mostly going into this pretty blind. I do believe that there is a strain on the right now, a conversation on the right about whether or not expertise is good or not.
Yes.
There's
May I kick this off?
Yeah. Do you want me just real quick? I mean, I just want to say that this whole like debate about whether or not like, oh well, should we trust experts? Are they really the ones who are going to come up with the best policies on tax or healthcare or what have you? And I think the answer is like yes, of course, right? We're not going to let like random Joes decide healthcare policy, right? I mean, to some extent, you do it through a really democratic process, right? But you're going to defer to science and expertise. That doesn't mean that they always get things right, but like the thing about science, right, is that it's a self-correcting process. That you're not going to debunk. You're not going to debunk scientific studies or like the vast scientific consensus on something by like squeezing the goat's testicles, right, like George Carlin would say, and like trying to discern an answer from that, right? Like you're going to use other science, more studies, more data, more evidence to try and present.
Yeah, the problem in the humanities is the lack of rigor with the sort of peer review process. Typically, this is why James Lindsay did his whole grievance study to see what he could get into these sort of magazines, what sort of garbage they would accept, like rewriting Mein Kampf to be about gender stuff. That's the sort of stuff that James Lindsay did to sort of show that the academia of the left, well, at least with the gender study stuff, they're rigid. They have basically they have no self-corrective measuring where science sort of needs that peer review, certain standards that need. But it has been, I personally think it has been weaponized by governments and corporations to different degrees. Anyone who knows about the tobacco stuff, they got their own experts in to do these studies. Like, oh yeah, cigarettes are absolutely healthy. That was their experts. My standard for the expertise is know who they're getting their money from and what. Like a lot of these government people rely on grants. If there aren't enough grants for people doing certain research, you're going to go where the grants go. Does that make sense? Follow the money.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably worth pointing out because I'm in a weird position with this, True, right? Because I'm sort of like the defender of expertise, or quote unquote the defender of the status quo, right? Of like American liberal democracy, right? And like all that goes with that. And then I'm also like simultaneously have this duality of like being someone who's like fighting against like quote unquote status quo narratives, right? When they're wrong. So it's difficult, but like what we need to do is like we need to find ways to like analyze like what is true and what's not, like fix the institutions. I think that like one thing that I'm bad at, and I don't know if Murray's going to go this route in the debate or not, but like one thing that I need to get better at is like how do we
Well,
like
I think people
criticize
framing it as a debate is foolish to start with, but I get the general sentiment with what people are going with.
Mhm. But like how do we not be reflexively defensive of them when they get things wrong? Because like a lot of people are fed up, a lot of voters, right? They voted for Trump like for a whole lot of reasons, but like among them is that they've lost all trust in the mainstream institutions of society, and like sometimes they've lost trust in institutions for like good reasons, right? Like the healthcare establishments getting things wrong during COVID, the
Yeah,
media
that's
getting
something
things
that
wrong.
gets brought up in the discussion they have. Plenty
Yeah.
of stuff that they both agree on. But it's the whole don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes, correct. But we also have to reform it too. Like if we went back to like how things were in 2024, like that would still leave a lot of people dissatisfied. Like so we're gonna have to like find some way to like synthesize reform with defense. Defense
Well,
of
at least,
institutions when they deserve it and reform when they need it.
well, Gray is at least in chat, even if he doesn't have time to come in. I hear what you are saying, but this isn't anything analogous to peer review studies. The experts here do not release research and instead declares this a science. That was just the sort of comparison for that particular issue there. Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I that was just my comparison to academia, where their experts are. There's different experts in different areas. And that's my stance on that. Douglas Murray definitely had, I've heard the term clown nose on, clown nose off. Personally, I heard someone say the sort of status that Dave is going for is like a motte and baily. You know, when he's debating online, he's known as a very knowledgeable guy, not an expert per se, just a very knowledgeable guy. And when he gets stuff wrong, he pulls back and like, I'm just a normal guy. I'm just a comedian. I've seen this done other places in other communities, like people doing reporting on gaming. When they get something wrong, they're like, I'm not a journalist. I would never be one of those stupid video game journalists. I'm just a normal guy. You see it in different areas. Okay, the sort of motte and baily of, yeah, we don't need to have standards at the end of the day. You understand how that is going?
Yes. We'll see what happens with the debate or the conversation.
Again, I think framing it as a debate purely is a mistake, a framing device. But yeah, let's get into it. As I said, thank you, Super Bam. I'm trying to think, is there any, for that reason, we don't get to see the wonderful sort of distortion that I put on this to get it through.
Began, and since the war in Ukraine began, you've had quite a lot of people who are very against both in different ways.
Yes.
Do you think you've had enough people on who are supportive of either war?
I don't know that word enough, if that's a good word.
Let's say enough people who are on the side of Israel instead of wild critics.
Well, I've had a few. I mean, I believe.
Yeah, let's pause it. I'm torn because I agree to some degree with Douglas's sentiment. I kind of separate once things get going. I agree. I think he's just feeling things out in the beginning section of this. It seemed when I was getting into it, I was thinking he's a sort of like an expert, non-expert. The expert has quotation marks around it for that particular matter there. But yep. But let's get this.
God's side is on the side of Israel.
For sure.
Jordan is on the side of Israel.
And I'm assuming people in chat can also hear the audio.
They should be able to on my end.
You had Mike Baker, Coleman Hughes.
Yeah.
Coleman did it for like 20 minutes. So it wasn't why he was here.
No, I mean, none of them. And none of them is why they're here. You know, it's a good question.
Do you think you've tilted one way?
Me personally,
No, just with the guests you've
the
had.
guess, yeah, probably more tilted towards the idea that perhaps the way they've done it is barbaric.
Mhm. But why do you think that is? Just out of interest. I'm just
'Cause
interested in your selection of guests because you're.
Does that strike you as anyone interesting? The guests aren't really for anything; they're just against.
Well, is that how Joe Rogan essentially sees it? That his guests are they're not for conservatism. They're not, right? I don't know every guest he's ever had. Right? I don't watch his show anymore.
I don't know, but talking about guests, we got a Grey Poupée here. Grey Poupon?
Hey, I
Yeah.
apologize. I did not check the time zone. I just thought I had like 30 more minutes. So my bad. I apologize for not being here a little bit more prompt. But
No, it's fine. I'm just glad
Yeah,
you
it's cool.
joined us. Dave Smith fan. I wanted to get someone who's can tell
Yeah.
give us a more Davy Smithian sort of approach on this. 'Cause I
First
know
off, he
a
doesn't
little
like the
bit too
term
much
Davy.
about him.
You don't know
I know-
about one of the greatest skanks of all? So I am a fan
Oh.
of Dave Smith. I've been a fan of his for a long time, but from the comedy world. So I love Legion of Skanks, which is Dave Smith, Louis J. Gomez, and Big J. Okerson. I've seen Legion of Skanks live once, but I love their show. As for Dave Smith, I've seen him live like 3 different times, but doing comedy. I mean, he isn't out there saying that he is an expert in policy. He just very much enjoys talking about these types of deals and then really enjoys debate. And he is one of the Rothbardian style of libertarians and really is trying to kind of push that whole philosophy, if you will. So
Hence my bias against him.
yeah,
'Cause I looked into
I think that might be fair enough. I'm glad that you know your own biases, and I'm not coming in here as like
Yeah.
a Douglas Murray hater or anything like that. I love a lot of what Douglas Murray has done in the past. He's definitely kind of pushed this whole idea that like these institutions that are somewhat controlled by a certain ideology don't have necessarily all of the correct ideas, and he's really given some amazing pushback, including his appearance that everyone's kind of talking about on Lex Friedman. I believe it was from 2022, but he gives a lot of pushback, and we'll talk about it in a moment when it comes up. But he gave a lot of pushback to kind of this whole idea that you must have lived experience, and he also seemed to kind of push back on
I just don't
the
think
whole
that
idea of
was
expertise.
completely the point Douglas Murray was trying to get at, but I understand how it comes across to an audience as that.
Well, let's see. Again,
Yeah.
you've got biases, but have you noticed
Yeah.
all of your biases? So I'm not biased against
probably
Murray,
not.
but man, I do not think that this is Murray's best appearance. Even a lot of those who are on like Dave Smith's side are kind of saying Smith didn't win this, Douglas lost this. So it's interesting. From hearing both of them, they were both asked to kind of have a conversation here. It's not a debate, as you kind of pointed out a few different times. And Joe Rogan keeps trying to keep it civil, but
Yeah.
from both of their interviews afterwards, it sounds like both wanted to go a little bit harder, but we're kind of taking it easy for Rogan's behalf.
Well, I suspect I know Murray's approach, a dismissive approach based on the
Well, and then-
evidence. Okay.
This also kind of sucks because Murray showed up there to promote his new book, and I don't think he necessarily wanted a debate either. So it is kind of interesting. Apparently, this was very much spur of the moment. Like Dave Smith had just been on Rogan, I think at the beginning of the week, and then all of a sudden they're doing this towards the end of the week. So it's interesting turn of events. But
yeah, I am curious
it really
how this particular thing turned out. Did Murray insist Doug to come on, or did Doug?
No. Doug?
I don't know the
Dave,
details around that.
So supposedly no. I think Douglas Murray was being a little bit weird about giving Joe Rogan some shit. So I think Joe Rogan for who he had on as experts. So I think that's why.
Yeah,
Rogan kind
I've
of
seen
arranged
some, and I got a few clips from that. If we want to get down that rabbit hole of either David Smith debating the guy he ended up debating on Twitter.
It's just Dave, man.
On
Dave Smith.
Yeah, but you got to be. Yeah, let's start this and listen to it.
The world's number one podcast.
Yeah, it's not.
It's-
I don't think about it that way. I just think I'd like to talk to this person.
But Can I just?
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
it's your
sure,
show, but
sure,
I mean,
sure.
If you're going to interview historians of the conflict or historians in general,
Hmm.
why would you get somebody like Ian Carroll?
Yeah, but Ian Carroll, I didn't bring him on for that purpose. I brought him on because I want to find out, like, how does one get involved in the whole conspiracy theory business? Because his whole thing is
Okay, so we got a lot of the Daryl Cooper, Ian Carroll, who, yes, I've seen giant posts debunking what he's saying. Are either one of you guys familiar with him at all?
Yeah.
No.
The people that
Are you familiar with him, Fenton? Because you seem to be saying like
I'm not
debunking him.
familiar with
What do
them.
you,
I'm just a
what do you think
severe
is being
nerd.
debunked?
What is being debunked? I'm not saying
Yes.
in this particular moment anything is being debunked. I'm saying the sort of
You said there's
credibility
a
of these
huge
guys.
post. You said, and correct me if
Yes.
I'm wrong, but you said you've seen a huge post debunking him. So what's it debunking?
Debunking Ian Carroll a while ago. I didn't actually have it up here. I'm just saying when they bring it up, like pushback online, I do have a little bit about what is it called? The sort of article that was done on Cooper.
Well, isn't the like
yes.
the main point of criticism here basically that Joe Rogan will have anybody on his show, but at the same
Yes.
time he'll never push back on anything whatsoever?
If
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
within
that
his
is a lot of the criticism.
expertise, yeah, it
Well,
is.
you
He's
can
like
you can conduct
Joe.
tough interviews with it being outside of your expertise, right? And you also have like he's also like one of the world's richest men. He can surely hire somebody to do some research on some things.
Well, he's got Jamie
Yeah.
there. Jamie pulls up
Yeah,
clips.
Jamie
and stuff.
sometimes, but that's only when they call him, basically. Did that happen in the Daryl Cooper? I didn't see it happen in the Derek Cooper stuff, but people have this wrong
the sad thing is,
idea.
it would be awesome
on.
if they went into this. I feel like, unfortunately, I'm going to be spoiling part of what they're about to say, but he doesn't get into it. He doesn't get with what his problem with Ian Carroll is or Daryl Cooper, other than there is this one statement that, so they'll get into it. I'll give it a little bit more context once we get there, but he doesn't say his big issue with them other than they're not experts. So I don't know what exactly you're supposed to do with that. Like, there are these guys who are really into history, so they're doing their own deep dives and then they're releasing. So for Daryl Cooper specifically, he spent like over 30 hours on this one particular subject. He has a point of view. He's not saying that he doesn't have biases, but I mean, none of us here are experts. So should we not be doing this? Should we not be commenting? Should we not be weighing in?
I
or
think that's
if you
the
actually
Buddhist
research
attitude, but we do the quality of work, the amount of research you put into something should be reflected. And
so you should bring up something about like the quality of work or something, not just saying he's not an expert.
Yeah, you sort of should if you can sort of pin it down. I got a particular thing where they say no one calls. Maybe I'm misquoting both Joe Rogan and David Smith. They might have a certain amount of wording, but definitely Tucker Carlson called him one of the most honest historians. Okay.
Yeah,
that was 7
he doesn't
months
call
ago
himself
when
a historian, though. That's somebody else.
He doesn't call himself. He lets
Wait, is
other
this the
people put
guy-
that label on him.
I don't want to put this out there, but was this the guy who was involved in that controversy on Tucker Carlson's show where he talked about
Yes.
the Holocaust?
Yes.
Okay.
Sort of. So the one that everyone is kind of pissed off on is his comment on Churchill. So he prefaced it in both ways. Like, first off, this is going to be super hyperbolic. Then he said his statement that he is actually one of the larger. I can't remember his exact thing, but basically saying that he was one of the biggest villains.
Saying it's hyperbolic is letting the pill go down.
But then he also
that would
said,
be the theory
this is
behind
just
it.
to get a rise out of my friend. So prefacing it before and then prefacing it after that, like, this is hyperbolic. This is to get a rise out of the person that I'm talking to. Somehow neither of those get taken. Just the quote in between and saying like this exists in a vacuum, which it does not. But yes, he has had different views on it. And then people have put their own views on him because of what he said about Churchill. That like, obviously he's pro-Hitler then. Now, I'm no expert on him. I haven't watched everything that he's done, but I have never gotten that vibe from the information that I've taken in from him. But he does seem to be passionate about that subject. And then he's also, passionate on getting his friend to actually react to that comment. I know I've said things specifically to make Vincent pissed off. It's kind of fun.
I'm sure among friends, but when you also have a sort of audience at play,
Well,
sheesh,
when
it's
you're
just-
when you're going on Tucker Carlson, sorry Vince, I cucked you. But
No.
when you're going on like Tucker Carlson's show, where like a lot of the people involved, I mean, a lot of people in the audience might actually genuinely believe the Holocaust didn't happen or that it was justified, right? If that's the case, you probably should be a little bit more careful, maybe, and maybe not make. I don't know.
For
Maybe,
sure.
yeah.
I don't think I'd be
And-
going on there making the same exact comments that he made. However, he never said anything like it didn't happen, or he never made any of these like weird, even dog whistly ones, like like a Fuentes type character or whatever has made. There is no like cookie joke or anything like in this. It was basically him saying, Churchill was also a bad guy in this. I think his quote was like one of the biggest enemies of World War II, which is very hyperbolic
big
for
villain.
sure. It was
very
a big. I
hyperbolic.
thought it was one of the biggest, is what he's saying. But
Okay,
yeah,
when you're
fair
talking
enough.
that much about a particular subject, it's just I'm very careful about what I'm seeing. I think one of our first encounters, you called something a laundry list fallacy, and I think that's a part of it.
Oh.
I called
Totally
it the
forgot
sort
about
of
it. Yeah,
gish
Douglas
gas,
Adams
gish
coined that.
gas method. Okay, I use gish galloping. In most cases, there's a lot of stuff in there. There's little pieces that if you just push back, that seems to be how Murray is treating it. Like if there's just one sort of premise within this thing that everything else sort of lampshades around, sort of protecting it, and the one thing stands out explicitly, it's just a weird sort of rhetorical trick. I've found if you maybe
Well-
you wouldn't agree if you went through all 30 hours, but there's a lot to go through. Go through 30
Well,
hours.
speaking of
seeing
rhetorical
where
tricks-
he's saying is true. Go on.
I'm just saying this debate or conversation, it has nothing of substance for over the first hour. If you're talking about rhetorical tricks, that's all I see in this, which really sucks.
It's
kind of-
feeling each other. People saying rhetorical tricks. It's just talking past each other most of the time. Them not agreeing on general premises because they're coming from different places here. They really should have done some prep beforehand, I think, if they wanted for this to go smoothly. But it's like they didn't talk about anything. They started recording and bam, Douglas put this in. And you can think that's dishonest or whatever. It's definitely a way to catch people off guard. I will admit that.
I don't know if I'd say it's dishonest. I don't think it's much of substance, and it sucks. It feels like it's all rhetoric, and there's absolutely nothing of substance. But perhaps I'm wrong, and perhaps I've poisoned the well enough.
Okay. Let's get into it some more.
It's largely to do with
Just like
people
Churchill.
who have appointed themselves experts, who are not experts.
You mean like Ian? I don't think he appoints himself an expert in anything.
Who's that other dude who thinks he's an expert on Churchill?
Sounds a little
Oh,
drunk
Daryl
there.
Cooper
Daryl.
does not think he's an expert.
In fact, I think it's everybody else is always calling him an expert, and he's like, I'm just a hit.
See, everyone else calling him an expert. He gets that in. Good on you, Dave. Point that out.
Have you ever absorbed any of his material? Have you ever consumed any of his podcasts or anything like
I
that?
tried.
Yeah?
It's pretty hard to listen to somebody who says, I don't know what I'm talking about, but now I'm going to talk.
Can you guys understand that perspective at least?
Well, let's.
I can, but keep this in mind, what he's saying right here. He was asked, okay, so you're commenting on Daryl Cooper. Have you ever actually absorbed any of his material? I think that should really be kept in mind for what's coming up next.
Well, he did
I
say he
know.
tried, which who knows what that
Yes.
means.
Yeah, who knows how much he tried to watch? Who knows what sort of what sort of mind state he went into? When did he try it? Was it after or before the Tucker thing? Because Joe apparently listened to him for 10 years or at least a couple of years from I'm getting from this. But at the end of the day, everyone going in with a different expectation. So
Well, and also too, like it's
Well,
what Murray said is something I do disagree with, which is, it's not just that, someone says, oh, I don't know anything about the topic there, now I'm going to talk about it. Like, that is, well, one, it's a little bit of a straw man, right? It's not that I don't know anything about the topics, that I'm not an expert, right? That's what they presumably would say. But then, like, the second thing too is, like, that's fine. Like, it's fine for us to have this conversation, right? But it's also, you should caveat like your level of knowledge or expertise on something. That's something that people are really bad at. And I'm not saying that like these particular like YouTubers
and
are
your
bad at it.
particular bias. Okay, admit your bias where you have it.
Admit your bias.
From.
And also like your level of knowledge. Like, so many people like stake out super strong positions on, well, they feel like they have to, right? Because of like social pressure to like stake out like super strong positions like Israel, Palestine. But like 90% of people like don't really know enough about it to really have like a strong view, probably, right?
Yeah, why should we listen to those people then? They would just probably feed us misinformation.
They probably maybe, right? Or if you do listen to them, right, like you would definitely like discount like that. You'd be like, okay, look, this is like you saw like 3 articles about it and you want to tell me about like this article that you read. Like, that's totally fine. We can have a conversation about like the article you read and like whether or not it matches like what other historians thought, right? Like, we can have conversations like that. You're going to have to throughout your life. Most people aren't content creators or experts, right? So we have to have these complex discussions with each other as humans in a democracy. But like,
I absolutely agree. Yeah. I made a lot of people...
things off of that. So I feel like I should admit my biases. I want to just disagree with Vincent no matter what the subject is. So I apologize about that. I know that going in here, but the audience should know that as well. I want to not
That's a
agree
very
with you.
specifically weird bias to have.
Well, I know
understand
you,
it, and
that's
I appreciate that about you. But unfortunately, sometimes you don't have the backing to really be able to counter what I say reflectively. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate
fantasy.
It gets me to think a little bit to get over the hump when I'm having trouble communicating things properly. So I appreciate it.
But speaking of appreciating, I've got a super chat.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you,
I appreciate
Ryan.
that.
We've got, if you look deep enough, you can find fucked up things about Churchill, but still doesn't change the fact that Hitler was a genocidal lunatic with goals of world domination, including bombing the UK.
Yeah,
Hitler was worse than Churchill.
And
100%. And I think even Daryl Cooper would be
undermine that. Okay, he seems like he's trying to hype up what Churchill was doing within that, creeping it slowly, getting it into the window.
I hear what you're saying, but again, how much of his content have you taken in, Vincent? You said that you weren't familiar with Daryl Cooper's work, but now you're saying that he's trying to creep this into the zeitgeist.
I did enough research to at least get the general lay of the land. I watched his Tucker Carlson interview. I watched,
which again, he said that he was being hyperbolic with a tongue-in-cheek comment.
That comes across as disclaimer, trigger warning. This is it. Just put it out there. And base a lot of your premises around it. Premises, or make a particular focus. That's where you deviate from. But I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. Don't call me a racist. You say this about me. You're trying to call me a racist. It almost feels like they're baiting people into getting that victim.
I feel like that's a really bad analogy, though. I mean, like, he's not saying anything like that. He's like, now I'm going to preface this by saying it's a very hyperbolic statement. And then after he said it, he's like, now that was a really tongue-in-cheek comment. I don't think that's like the same as saying I'm not a racist.
This point in history, when people sort of have to preface it this much, it's sort of like when other people, I'm not trying to be culturally insensitive, but blah, blah, X. Okay. That's how it seems
just don't think that's analogous. So it's exactly what Tachyon was saying, where it's like, okay, you know that you're going on this program with this type of audience. Perhaps you should preface your comment. And then the fact that he is friends with Tucker, he was trying to get a rise out of his friend. To me, that doesn't come off as somebody claiming, no, I'm not racist, but I think that's really poisoning the well, the way that you kind of did that. But fair enough. I am already against you. So we already knew that was going to happen this way.
Yeah, but you're already poisoned.
Well, I guess the real question, right, is like, how many other times... Well, I guess 2 things, right? How many other times has he made jokes like this, quote unquote? And then, like, at the same time, too, how important is it? I think this was what Vincent was kind of getting at. Like, how important is this to his overall worldview? Like, if you take out this, like, Churchill's terrible like perspective? Like, does his worldview like no longer work what he's trying to promote like to the public?
Yeah, it's like a lot of his stuff lines up well with reality. It's just a couple things that he just pushes a little bit in the Churchill is almost as bad. That's Douglas Murray. I think that's what Douglas Murray is getting at with this particular thing. He explains it much better in a particular tweet. But let's listen to this a little bit more. Let me make sure I can get access to.
Do you have one question to kind of keep in mind while we're listening to the rest of this? What personally would you think an expert is, or what would meet your qualifications for an expert?
Someone who shows they have a factual understanding of the subject matter that they're talking about. Akin?
I guess, yeah, I would say I don't know. I think you could look at it like a couple of ways. Like one of which is like the credentialed way, like, oh, do you have a PhD? But I don't think that's like required to be an expert. I think that's like one way that you could like try to demonstrate it. But then also to like looking at somebody's body of work, I think would probably be like a more important way. If you've got a PhD into something and you've written like 5 studies that are published and peer reviewed in respectable journals, and they don't seem to be, they seem to be replicated by other studies, they're like, okay, like, you probably have like some degree of expertise here. Also, like too, if you're like an author or a journalist and you like spent, like Dylan Burns went to Ukraine, right? He's actually on the ground reporting on Ukraine. Doesn't have a PhD. He's 23 years old, right? But he's on the ground, been on the ground for 2 years documenting the war. I would say he's like an expert in that way, right?
Okay, he might have a sort of bias for the Ukrainians if he's lived with them. Might not have the
says
proper frame of reference going in. Okay, but yeah, here, I'll play this. Maybe I'll bring in the other thing before we get into a fresh round of hell.
I don't know about this, or I'm not capable of debating this historian, but I'm going to just tell you what I think.
Yeah, but that's not exactly what Daryl was saying. I mean, Daryl's point of view, however you feel about this, what Daryl is saying is he doesn't really like doing debates. He likes to do long format stuff where he can really explain his position.
If you throw a lot of shit out there, there's some point at which I'm just raising questions is not a valid thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not
depends how much
you're not asking questions. You're telling people something.
Do you think Daryl's doing that?
I think there's a whole bunch of guys doing that. I think Dave is doing that, very obviously. Dave's a comedian, but he's now mainly talking about Israel.
It does seem like a weird position, but Douglas Murray, I find it more suspect because he's promoting a certain political party. I see him almost as an activist. That's how I see Dave. This is why I have a bias that other people might not have about Dave.
I mean, Douglas Murray wrote a book. I think the title is just Neocon, and you're just pinning it on Dave that he's promoting a certain political party. It's like they're both doing that. So when you look at Douglas Murray's background,
I can't disagree with.
But you're not pointing that
Douglas
out. You're
Murray.
only pointing out Dave's side, that he is somehow a political figure. Where when you look at Douglas Murray's background, he's got a bachelor's in English. So he is now talking about war, and he's talking about.
You're misunderstanding me, Greg. Douglas Murray is hard backing this particular caucus within the Libertarian Party that took over recently. He even talked about possibly running 2024 as the president.
So I think you misspoke there because you're saying Douglas Murray. So I was talking about Douglas Murray.
Dave Smith.
Yeah. So I know Dave's. I'll get into Dave in a second.
There is a possibility he is looking for actual political position. He's keeping that open.
You're 100% incorrect on this. So the Mises Caucus did take over much of the Libertarian Party, and they did want Dave to be the actual presidential candidate.
Yeah, and he flirted with the idea.
I'm not done yet, Vincent. He did not.
Okay.
So he has said that there is too much information on the internet out there from the Legion of Skanks where they're literally doing podcasts where they're just saying the most offensive shit ever. It is billed as the world's most offensive podcast, and that was their core values. He knows that he is not an option to actually be a candidate. He has never wanted it, yet people keep pushing him forward because he is a likable figure. He's very funny. He's personable. He could actually be a better figurehead for a very fucked up party, if you will. But On the opposite side of that coin, Douglas Murray in here, he has written a book literally calling himself a neocon, and he is definitely pushing one kind of point of view as well. However, it's not like he has a bunch of degrees in like political science or anything like that. He's got a bachelor's in English. So it's not like his bona fides are a ton better. He obviously is very interested in this Israeli war thing. He was embedded
personally
in 2022.
invested as the same thing with Dylan Burns. You go in, I mean, he might just have his bias out of order within this,
sure.
But he's been over there.
But I'm just saying,
bias is compromised for the people who will let him in, not the people who won't let him in. To sort of,
but it's not like he's got a bunch of bona fides or anything like that. That's like, obviously you must bow to my degrees. I am an expert. You are not. He still feels, comfortable to weigh in on all these things. Yet he seems to be closing the gate behind him, as if, you need to be up to his level in order to talk about certain issues. Where Dave has been involved in politics, not like running for anything. People have tried to get him to run as the presidential candidate. He always said no, but he's willing to go to these Mises Caucus rallies, and he's willing to try and get that particular caucus, which he does, put more weight behind, and he does like that because it does very much go hand in hand with his Rothbardian type of philosophy that he follows. So he has been supportive of them, but it doesn't seem like either of them are running for office or anything like that in the near future. Maybe that's something that could happen one day, but yeah, it just I don't know. It seems like
I saw
one side gets called out as a political
Reason
figure, but not the other.
Talking to Dave Smith's possible running. He said as much. Like, if no one else will step up, I'll step up. He'll leave that. He's leaving that possibility up there. No matter if he said if things would have to extremely change in the culture for him to have any shot. Plus, it's third party. They're more, I think also the Rothbardian perspective tends to latch on, if I understand. I don't know if Dave follows that one-to-one, but there's a couple of things about the sort of philosophies of that in the past that makes me wonder.
Yeah. So Dave himself is Rothbardian, and he does support the Mises Caucus, but it's not 100% his philosophy. The Mises thing is...
I know.
Somewhat controversial within the libertarian.
As he describes
sort of where he stands.
He's more into what got him in was the Ron Paul revolution. I know that much at the very least. So I don't know how much he actually, I know, I think Rothwell, whatever the guy is, actually didn't really like, but we're getting on side tangents now. Let's come back here and see what's being said.
No, I don't know if I'm mainly talking about Israel.
That's all I see you
on
the internet doing.
Yeah, but that's
that might be what you've seen.
It's
but
just
I don't think that's
that is also your shtick now, isn't it?
Well, what do you mean by that's my shtick?
Well, you're not a geopolitics guy in general, are you?
I don't even know exactly what you're asking.
I'm saying you've decided, being a comedian, you've decided now to become somebody who talks about Israel.
I think you're incorrect. I don't think it's a decision. I just think you have long form conversations, multiple of them. It's a huge event that's in the news, so it comes up. I don't think it's a thing. I think if you're on the outside, you'd say, oh, look, they're trying to get attention by talking about this very polarizing issue.
Yeah, I don't know how far we're going to get. As Grace says, this debate is rather rough in the very beginning and doesn't get much better throughout. Or, sorry, I called it a debate. More the discussion around it. I mean,
I don't think it's worth skipping the start because it really sets the tone for everything.
If you want to do the start,
do not get into it until like near the end, sadly.
Well, we could do like 1.5 speed, right?
Okay, possibly.
Or 1.25.
It's already sped up a little bit, but yeah. Let's see. Yep. Thanks, Superbam Inc.
Publicly.
But you do get attention from that. If you'd spent the last year speaking about Myanmar, you would not be on my lips.
Yeah, but he does talk about Yemen constantly. He talks about a lot of things that aren't in the news.
Well, I tend to talk about the conflicts that my government is directly involved in, which I think is reasonable to me. But I don't quite get what's all the appeal to authority stuff. I mean, you have to be an expert. Or
I think authority matters. I think authority matters.
See, automatically from this particular point, he's putting this on. And I think that's a little slippery. I think they're misunderstanding.
What do you mean by he's putting this on?
He's the one putting this sort of narrative out.
So if he's not getting it, I'm also not getting it. So what I got from Douglas Murray is that he's not an expert, but somehow he can retreat to this "I'm a comedian" thing, which I've watched Dave Smith for a long time. I have never seen him use that as an excuse, aside from one time at the beginning.
Okay.
So I've heard him say that literally one time, and that was during a phone interview on the Sam Cedar, whatever the hell that's called, the something report. There was one time where he seemed to not really understand, and when he said his piece, they're like, yeah, I don't know if that quite works. He's like, well, I'm not an expert, I'm a comedian. He said that one time, and that was like 15 years ago, 12 years ago. It was a long-ass time ago. I have never heard him do that since he's seriously gotten into either the debate or the kind of political field, but it's something that has always interested him. That's why he has a separate podcast from Legion of Skanks. It's part of the problem. It literally is a political podcast, and he got taken off of Gas Digital Network, which is the one that hosts his other podcast, even though it's the podcast network is owned by one of the three Legion of Skanks, Louis J. Gomez. He didn't want any political stuff on his comedy network, so he had Dave go off of that and start his own podcast network. And I don't know, man. It seems like he has done a whole lot of research, and he is up to date on all of these issues, but he definitely has his own biases in that. One of his best friends is Scott Horton, who runs antiwar.com. He gets a lot of his information from there. And that really is one of his biggest influences, is he really is anti-war. So that's where a lot of this shit is coming from. It is a bias.
Lot of time talking about like these people instead of the discussion they were having.
Yeah,
seriously, it's the first hour and a half. That's all it is.
It's not all it is. There's a lot of
there's no substance.
I said this myself, that in certain discussions you want to sort of read the room and sort of see what positions and what sort of language it comes up, and trying to communicate with people outside your circle can sometimes be tough. Maybe it's a Steelman, a Murray a little bit too much to say he did that. I'm not the only one who had this reading of this. But yeah, let's listen to the words, since this is important, and I'll try to hold back a little bit.
I think that if you just throw a lot of shit out there and then say, I'm not interested in the alternative views on this, and particularly when it's a counter narrative that is wildly off. And when you get people, look, I just feel we should get it out straight away. I
that's
feel
really
shitty. The door to quite a lot of people who've now got a big platform, who have been throwing out.
What's really shitty?
Saying that he's not open to hearing the opposite side of it, when I think there's like one debate that Dave Smith has turned down, and that was Destiny, and that's because he didn't want to platform Destiny or deal with his type of
honestly,
debate.
Then yeah, see, he turned down the one person who probably kick his ass.
It could be. He also he learned a bit about Destiny and was like, yeah, I have no interest in actually talking to this dude.
Yeah. Well, I think he's a coward,
he regularly
honestly
engages with people who disagree with him. So it sounds really shitty when Murray is like, coward. To not be able to engage with anybody who has, I can't remember, he said views opposite of his. I can't remember the exact way that he worded it, but it's like, that seems shitty. And he's not bringing up any examples of anything. It's just accusation. You say you're not an expert, but then you retreat to comedian. You will not listen to any point of view that does not favor yours. Like,
well, don't you think that?
I don't know, man.
You're
if he's running away from a debate with Destiny, I think calling him out is fine. I mean, he's a coward.
No, he's not running away. His audience and Destiny's audience both said that they wanted that. Nobody called each other out or anything like that. And he's like, yeah, I have no interest in talking to that guy.
Yeah, I view that.
I mean, if
Anita Sarkeesian was saying like, "Oh, Tachyon won't debate me," I'd be like, "Okay, let's have the conversation tomorrow."
Yeah,
I
understand, but I don't think you can. I don't think you can say that he is unwilling to hear a different point of view if he is not turned down.
Yes, but he won't engage with it. It is true that Dave Smith is resilient to arguments that aren't perfectly aligning with what he's going along with.
And like Destiny's known as being like the #1 like pro-Israel debater, like on Twitch and YouTube, and well, not Twitch anymore, I guess, right? But like YouTube and Kick. So like not having that conversation with the premier debater on the topic.
Well, that's not all he's known for. Side. But I hear what you're saying. He definitely is a formidable adversary in the debate field, at least the online debate field.
Well, and that topic in particular, too. Just, the Israel-Palestine topic in particular.
Yeah, and I really don't like what position Murray, not Murray, I keep getting them backwards. Dave Smith sort of took when he debated the guy on Piers Morgan recently. Did you watch that at all, Gray?
Yeah. That wasn't really a debate, though. Like, that's the problem with calling these things debates. So, yes, there was a response, and this guy got... It seemed like Piers was a lot more willing to let this guy talk. But I still wouldn't call that a debate. I mean, like, there has to be, like, an agreed-upon thing where it doesn't seem like either of them was willing to actually engage, because his entire point just went over the guy's head. He kept saying, like, okay, it's a moral issue. If this wasn't in a state of war where you have declared war, just dropping leaflets on top of a building and then blowing it up, you would get charged for murder. However, just because we're saying, no, war has been declared, this is now okay. He wouldn't meet with him on the moral thing. He's like, you just don't understand what it means to declare war. It's like, no, I do understand. So it was two different moral, things, and it's much of what's going on with this same Murray conversation.
Comes to his moral position, which I don't understand. What sort of moral principles is he that just killing civilians no matter what is bad? Self-defense is bad. If it's kills civilians, it's so just not a one-to-one comparison.
Dave Smith again. You said, yes, how does Murray come to his? So, okay, Dave Smith, so you need to read some Rothbard, but essentially what Rothbard is saying is just because somebody has declared themselves the state doesn't give them any more rights than the people. If it's immoral for you to commit this act to somebody else, just because somebody calls themselves the state and has some authority doesn't make it any more moral for them to do this action. That's the way that Dave is looking at it.
That's an extremely narrow viewpoint to actually go from, but... At least I can understand a little bit better about how it is.
It is the principle of non-aggression. Essentially, you will not aggress against somebody else. You do not have any special rights just because you are the state. You still have the same moral responsibilities. Not necessarily.
Go on, Tachyon, if you want to argue against that.
No, we could, but it's not really
I personally think the state, on an individual level, you have responsibilities, at least to your community and to family. This is why people who lose connection with family, friends, tend to lose grip with reality and go into a rather bad place when they don't have those responsibilities built in around them. Government is like a million times more complex too. And every time the expert was like, these are not fair comparisons. These analogies that you keep making are not compatible because you don't understand the process that the difference between morals of individuals and morals of leadership, I believe, would be his position.
I don't feel like that's fair. He disagrees. It's not that he doesn't understand. He disagrees that you have these special rights because you're calling yourself the state. I think that's completely uncharitable. It's
extremely stubborn and just completely one-minded. Okay, not to.
It is completely really going off a different philosophy.
Okay, well, I guess
should we be tolerant of other philosophies? A lot of people on the right, like you got me self-conscious about using the right name. Douglas Murray would say about responsibilities and having certain standards and having a strong positioning for strength reasons. Okay. And he's more coming from the self-defense school of thought, and to just dismiss that completely. Again, it's a lot of talking past each other and different. I would say this was more of an ideological battle between pretty much the principles of liberalism that Douglas Murray holds and the sort of Rothbardian principles of David Smith. I got completely off. A lot of the people on sort of Douglas Murray's side would say the principles of Islam or Mohammed, that religion, are incompatible with much of the West.
Right, he wrote a whole book about that too.
Exactly. So he's coming from the place where I think he's coming from a place where Dave's principles is something he is sort of gatekeeping around it. I agree with that. He's not being super tolerant to Dave, because Dave also gets facts wrong. But let's continue on.
So, well, you're just throwing that out there, but you're being as vague as I would say
later in the debate. I can give you examples later in the debate where he corrects him on facts and Dave doesn't give him any pushback. He moves on to another subject matter instead of being like, you're incorrect here. Or he laughs at him. He's like, that's just stupid. He doesn't actually give any counterfacts to anything Murray. To be fair,
and I can point out just as many times where Murray doesn't respond at all. Well, I was going to say, I can point out just as many times in this, and I hope you will as well, where Murray doesn't respond. He just points out or throws out an accusation with zero facts behind it, and then Dave brings up a point, and he will not either engage with it or give a counterfactual, and instead just sidesteps to something else. Well, yeah, but you're not an expert. It's coming up. Like, enjoy.
Okay.
But I hope you look at that with both sides, and you do actually point those out when Murray does it as well.
Okay. Depends on the particular thing. As I said, I have my bias. I don't know all the facts. I know rhetorically how this appears to be here. And I agree. A lot at the beginning doesn't seem right, because there's a certain technique within discussions that get a little bit heated where you get a sort of feel for your opposing side. In a normal debate, like in a lot of platforms on YouTube, it's just straight to the point. This is a little bit different, a little more complex of a beast to pick apart.
Counter-historical stuff of a very dangerous kind.
You mean Daryl? Are you talking about Daryl?
Daryl, who's the other one?
I don't think Daryl has a...
Derek,
I don't think he's anything dangerous about
what's the other guy? Derek... what's his name? Cooper? Is it? Which one is it?
No, it's Daryl
Daryl
Cooper.
Cooper. Who's the other one?
Yeah, let's actually move along.
On the way here.
Let me figure out where to move along.
Yeah, Daryl Cooper.
Well, if you skip this, you're skipping something.
They're not knowledgeable.
If I get into skipping
later on, if you skip this, though, you're skipping something. So right here, he said, again, he hasn't consumed any of Daryl Cooper's information. In fact, he keeps calling him the wrong name, Derek something. He said that he tried to listen to some of it. He couldn't do that. Yet he is willing to go on Joe Rogan, this very big platform, and just completely trash this guy. Yet he is not an expert at knowing anything that this guy has done. In fact, he knows one quote from him, and that is what he's basing his entire opinion on. If you're skipping this, that part needs to be put out there, because that's literally what he's going to accuse Dave Smith of doing in moments.
I will agree with Gray really quick here and just say that if Murray did come into this conversation thinking like, look, I'm going to talk to Joe Rogan and confront him about his platforming and use this specific example, then like he probably should have had more meat to it and had more research ahead of time. If this was the plan.
I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what any of these people were brought into. Again, this is calling this a debate. If it's a debate, it's a failure on all sides. But as a convo, I'm trying to get a read of this. And what Gray is saying is just Douglas Murray is a hypocrite. Yeah, I guess you can say that in a certain degree.
Well, no one's calling Ian Carroll.
No, but then why listen to their views on Churchill?
Daryl is incredibly knowledgeable.
He's not.
Yeah,
he's not. He's wildly... Several reasons. One is, when he was offered to debate the current greatest living biographer of Churchill, he said, I can't, because he knows much more than me, and I admire his work and I've learned from it, but I can't possibly debate. That's Andrew Robb.
But you don't have to be able to debate people to have opinions.
No, you don't have to debate people.
If it's not your thing.
But if you, for instance, if you say, I've decided that Churchill is the bad guy in
World
War II.
Somebody said.
Neither Carroll nor Cooper have said that?
Well, listen, I don't know what Carroll said, but Daryl Cooper's not said that. What he said was he jokes with his friend Jocko, who's an Anglo-Saxon. He jokes with him, I think that Churchill was the secret villain of World War II. And what he's saying is by Churchill's actions, the war escalated.
Okay, no clue how that will go in the ether there. Want to be careful with that. Okay, I have something inserted in this that I've seen. It's not framed exactly the same, but
he's not saying anything.
Not just asking questions, then, is he?
No, but that's the claim isn't that he's just asking questions.
Here it is. This is what I'm seeing coming up. Do you know anything about this, Gray? Or is people just putting out without context? Oh, sorry. I need to put it on the screen. I need to put it on the screen. Okay. Sorry. Okay. People are putting this. And a lot of people are saying the chief villain. And they're like, no, he said a chief villain.
Wait.
I know it sounds like hyperbolic.
What's this part here about where he says, I know that sounds like hyperbole. Churchill didn't order the most deaths, oversee the most atrocities, or commit the most war crimes, but most of those crimes would not have been committed if the war had not happened, and Churchill was the leader most intent on making it. Presumably, the next part has happened, which is like, that's an insane take.
It is a bit insane. Douglas Murray just thinks
Winston Churchill Winston Churchill did want to go to war with Hitler because Hitler was invading all of his neighbors.
Yeah, but this is the sort of thing that I put in here to sort of say, you're walking it back a little bit more when you're introducing it on a different platform. You preface it.
Also, Churchill wasn't even the one who declared war, I believe. Wasn't it Chamberlain's government before Churchill?
Sheesh, I can't remember from what I'm
not like
I went with the timeline.
Either, mind you.
I just know Churchill wasn't. I've heard Churchill wasn't even in power. Not that he wasn't advocating for it, and it got him into power in 1940. Okay, he didn't even get the sort of power he needed to do anything until 1940. And I'm just pointing out the same thing Murray is and what I'm seeing. Any thoughts on this, Gray, if you haven't seen it or you know more about it?
Yeah, well, it's a response to essentially that same thing that he said to Jocko. Like, it is part of the same thing. And he says, like, I know this sounds like hyperbole, and it is. However, as the leader, would you not be responsible for the actions that happened during that? I think it is extremely hyperbolic, and you run risk of having everybody interpret everything you're saying as, so he's the worst person in this war.
What do you think is you don't have to answer this. What's the point of making it hyperbolic? Hyperbolic.
So he was talking to his friend. He was trying to get a rise out of Jocko at the time. But then on top of that, he's trying to get in
the conversation with Tucker Carlson. Okay. Why bring that up, that particular story?
If I remember right, I believe Jocko was in that conversation too, if I remember right. If not, I might be combining two different conversations. But the thing is, Martyr Made is his podcast, and he is trying to get eyes on it. If you look at this tweet, it has 7.7 million views. It is doing what everybody is doing on the internet. It is getting eyes to look at it. And then
if everyone on the internet decides to jump off a cliff, does that mean it's a good idea?
So you've got 2,700 reposts, and you've got 1,200, almost 1,300 quotes. And then I can't see exactly how many replies are on there, but it's something in the K's. I'm just saying, it seems like this was effective in getting eyes towards that comment. I think that is what Twitter's about right now.
Eyes towards this comment would you get? And would you want to maintain this any audience people who subscribe to you off of these hyperbolic ideas?
Well, you would get them to listen to your long forum podcast about Churchill, and then you'd be able to bring up your actual points in there. So hopefully you would get some eyes coming over to what you're actually doing. So it seems like it might be some of that advertising thing that, is all the rage.
So let's say this isn't really his true view. He really did just want to do it as like a marketing tactic, right? He wanted to say it on Tucker, put some tweets out there because he thought it would get a lot of attention. And he's like, well, look, if people watch my long form content, they're going to know that that's not my true opinion. I just, did it to be a little bit spicy. If that is the case, like, isn't this like not good? Like, shouldn't we like not be encouraging content creators to act in this way or journalists to act in this way?
I mean, I would prefer if people didn't, but I don't know how you put that kind of clickbait thing back in the bottle. So I'm not saying that he doesn't have any views that, Churchill was a villain in this, but I don't think that he thinks Churchill was worse than Hitler or anything like that, or Churchill is actually what led to, the most deaths or anything like that.
Well, he is though, right? That is his opinion and the clarification, right? But most of those crimes would not have been committed.
Not exactly. He didn't order
part
the
of
most
the problem.
deaths.
He would definitely say he's part of a problem, like David Smith's podcast.
Yeah, he's most of the problem, right? Most of the crimes. That's what he says right there.
That wasn't.
But you're missing the other half of the statement, which is Churchill didn't order the most deaths. So, like,
he's
he is still saying
for them, though, right? Just not directly. That's what he's saying, right?
Yeah, it does seem from this. This could be taken out of context.
There is more to what he's saying. I'm not saying that he doesn't believe this at all, that like this is like a 180 from his actual beliefs. But what you're able to give out in long form is so much easier than what you're able to actually put into a tweet. However, if the purpose of this tweet is to get people to look at it, to engage with this, it seems like it was successful. Now you're asking, like, should that be what we're doing? I don't know if any of us can say what we should be doing, but yeah, I'm not participating in anything like this. Like, I'm not looking to just get huge interactions.
I mean, it's a horrible precedence to set that just of people who say the most wildly shocking things. He's not setting the precedent, but he's encouraging the precedent. Okay, he's
participating
into it. Yes,
I would say he's participating in the trope, but he's not creating this or anything like that. He could just
come out and apologize. Has he done that? And be like, hey, look, I
no, you never.
But why would he apologize if he does believe this? However,
no, apologize for. Oh, if he does believe. Wait, sorry, please, go ahead. I'll mute myself.
So, I mean, like, yeah, if this is something that he doesn't believe in and it was literally just clickbait, like, yeah, I do believe that he is principled enough that he would apologize for it. But I don't see that as what he's doing here. I think he is able to use a very hyperbolic way of explaining some of his beliefs that he could much more, I don't know, palatably explain in a long form presentation.
Would he retract this sort of clickbait is what I think people are getting at. And we don't know.
I think that's a retarded statement to say that somebody should retract their tweet because it got eyes on it.
No, I don't think. No, that's what
it's not the retract, but to sort of
well, what Vincent just said was, is he going to retract the tweet? It's like, no, it seemed to be successful for what he was trying to do.
Like, hey, look, I was wrong. I was being hyperbolic on purpose, right?
If that's the term I wanted to use was walk back this term and give it more clarity.
And be like, hey, look, actually, either he believes it or he doesn't, right? Fundamentally. And if he does believe it, then I think he probably isn't a very serious person on the topic. And again, that's only
your argument to me in a less hyperbolic way, I guess, would be the best. So then,
can I ask you
more clarity?
So you use the term tachyon, a serious person. So what would a serious person be in this? I don't know what you're saying. This field. So, like, do you consider like Dan Carlin, like hardcore history? Do you consider that dude to be a serious person?
I've only seen his World War I stuff. I don't know his World War II stuff, but I would say he is, yes, from what I've seen.
So this dude definitely has an ideological point of view, but and I have not ingested like all 30 hours on this subject or anything like that. I listened to like a couple of them and I didn't find anything like super entertaining to me. So I didn't continue with the series. I think I have a good majority of them downloaded, but I, for some reason, can't like bring myself to listen to them. So I don't know, but I didn't get these unserious.
You tried to watch it. You tried to listen. Sorry. You did the
no. I've listened to a few different hours. Well, I at least listened to 2 hours. That's 2 hours more than you, Vincent.
Okay. Who knows how much Douglas Murray?
Me and Douglas Murray at least tried. Vincent didn't even give it that much. Just you grab this tweet. So I don't know. As long as you're gonna throw accusations out there, I still don't think that is a great. I don't know what you'd call that. Any sort of gotcha or anything like that. Like, I'm not super into Churchill. I don't really want to read or listen to prolonged, I don't know, information.
I guess the reason
failures he has.
Yeah, you asked me like directly, why would I like not think he's serious, right? And I guess the fundamental thing is like this, like, so World War II is like I feel like it's a huge topic, and then I feel like
for sure
getting this aspect of the story wrong of like who was most responsible, or if not directly, then indirectly, who was like the most responsible for it, and then putting that on the an allied leader of a democratic country, flaws and all that Britain had, and like placing the primary blame of the war and most of the crimes, directly or indirectly in this case, on Churchill instead of like Hitler and Mussolini or even Stalin, right? You could argue in some cases, right? But like instead of placing it there or on Imperial Japan, like the people who started the actual war, I feel like that's like just wild.
So I hear what you're saying. So I don't think he's doing that. I don't think he's saying that Japan is perfect, that Hitler was
but
absolutely
you don't
perfect.
know he's
None
not
of these guys are
trying to do this.
Vincent, I'm not done yet. Hold on.
Yeah,
but I don't think that you'd be an unserious person to say that George Bush was one of the W was one of the villains of, like, say, the whole like Afghanistan war. The same thing with Desert Storm. What was it, 2? By saying like these atrocities were directly out of the ideology that they had inside there. I don't think you'd be an unserious person. Yes, he wasn't out there like promoting we need to go do these war crimes or whatever, but if they didn't have this kind of unified mission of bringing liberty to other countries, I don't think a lot of these atrocities would have happened. A lot of these deaths wouldn't necessarily have happened. I wouldn't say that somebody is like an unserious person because they're saying, hey, due to his actions, these further inactions, these atrocities were brought forth and were able to be committed. I don't know. Is there a huge difference in pointing that out? Because I wouldn't say that somebody who's
the truth
claiming
claim,
W,
I think, is the thing, right? Like, because like I think a lot of people would say that like most of the deaths that occurred in the Iraq War or in Iraq post-war due to economic recession and power grid failures and insurgencies, right? I think that like that was like quote unquote America's fault, right?
Yeah,
I think most people would say that, right? But then like most people would also say that Hitler was like at fault too, right?
And
like
I don't think he's ever said that Hitler isn't at fault here. He said one of. And if you look, he said, Churchill didn't
plausible
order
deniability, definitely.
It's not plausible deniability. That doesn't even come close to like matching the situation at all.
Not perfectly. I agree. Not perfectly. It's a hyperbolic way of explaining it, Gray.
It is hyperbole.
Yeah. But like to use like the Iraq example, like it is like
that one's rather clear. But like it's also something most agree on. You sort of Hitler's an even better one. Okay, people going back and examining it, and trying to introduce this new fact after the matter and try to hype up this sort of narrative. And if I remember on Tucker Carlson, what actually led to this, I'm recalling from memory, so I could be imprecise on this, but it's sort of like talking about the mythology that people have in America about the World War II. My mouth is already getting rubbery. But yes, that particular war, the sort of mythology around the figures of that and trying to get within the German sort of shoes that sort of tell his sort of story. From the German perspective, it sounds like a little bit of standpoint theory in there. But let's continue on. I mean, this is something that will never get known. But I just wanted to introduce this. Sorry to derail with it.
Disclaimed. He goes, and I'm not claiming Churchill committed the most atrocities or was the worst part, but in many ways, I do view him as the chief villain, as my hyperbolic, provocative statement. But
what's
Douglas,
the point of that?
Well, okay, but Pat Buchanan wrote an entire book on this. Is he not allowed? Is he not an expert? Is he not allowed to be
interviewed? He's certainly not an expert. He can be interviewed. I've watched Pat Buchanan debate. I watched Pat Buchanan debate against Churchill historians, and he was absolutely leveled because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
When did Pat Buchanan debate and get leveled?
About 20 years ago.
But
if you only get the contrary view, which is
I did do a little cuts, but very minor cuts where, because there's a lot of repeating of stuff. I tried to leave it mostly untacked.
Isn't it fun if we all pretend Churchill was the bad guy of the 20th century? At some point, you're going to lead people down a path where they think that's the view. And that's horse shit of the most profound kind.
Okay, thoughts about that particular idea?
That I think is like the thing, like the clickbait thing. He puts out this misinformation, even if in his podcast where he's talking about it, he's way more nuanced and clarifies, and that's not really his true position, right? Even if he does that, there's gonna be a lot of people who probably like respect him, I assume, right? Who are content creator fans of his, or they listen to his show, and they think he's doing a good job. They think he's trustworthy on things. He puts this tweet out there. That's his opinion. A lot of people are gonna see this, and I think a lot of people, the way they interact with like social media isn't that they always immediately go and dive into like the full long form where they're going to get like the additional context. They're going to base it on what they saw in that tweet that got 7 million views, right? They're going to base their view on that in some cases on this tweet. And they're going to go around and they're going to tell their friends and family. They're going to tell other people on social media. They're going to tell them, hey, look, Winston Churchill was actually the bad guy on World War II. There's this great podcast I listen to about history. And he's not an expert, but he's not a historian in a PhD sense, but he's done thousands of hours or hundreds of hours of research on this topic. He thinks that Winston Churchill was really to blame for most of the crimes that happened in the war. And he's going to tell other people that. People think that, they believe that, right?
Yeah, but if he can actually like point out where he thinks Churchill would be responsible, and if he hadn't made these decisions, these outcomes wouldn't have happened. I think that's perfectly acceptable for somebody to do on their own podcast. I think it would be perfectly acceptable for him to make a very, what would you call that? Incendiary tweet that he did before that then got eyes on this where he could then fully explain it. To me, that seems just fine. It seems like this really
but then you downplay it in the public when you go on. You up the levels.
He's not downplaying it. I feel like that is completely bullshit. He literally prefaced the statement before he said it that now this is hyperbolic. Here's why I'm saying it. He then said the statement, and then he again said, I understand that this is hyperbole. I'm looking to get a rise out of my friend when he then said it. So it to me, that's not downplaying it. That's literally doing his own thing. There's already two different
versions of him saying this. Probably multiple places. You have the tweet.
So you're not including the entire tweet thread of that. But that tweet thread. Okay, so that tweet thread is in response to his appearance on Tucker Carlson, where he said that. That's why he then brought it into the tweet form. If I remember right, that's the order of events for those things. They are related to the same event. You can say that he's doing this numerous times. Yeah, he's had to because of the way that people were like coming at him and shit. He then had to explain it further, and he does with that tweet thread. I noticed that you grabbed the one response to it, but not his entire thread. So fair enough. But is he then not an expert because he's not willing to debate the foremost expert in the field? Do you have to then, because you say, hey, I have this point of view, this is my podcast?
He would have more credibility if he was able to take his ideas and debate.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. My question wasn't, would he have more credibility if he debated? It's, is he required to?
Yes.
That seems to be Douglas Murray's requirement.
Can I answer this? Because this is something I've thought about a lot, unfortunately, and I'm still not sure what the fuck I think. Because I'm sort of of two minds about that. Because on one hand, I think that a lot of different people have different skills, and like debating is a skill in and of itself. Like you could be really knowledgeable on a topic, and the way you put that information out there is through a book or through a documentary or through like any number of ways. Like they're all different types of ways to engage with the public and convince people.
Or you could be
different things. Or you could be
a rhetorician.
Yeah,
where you just know how to use rhetoric.
But at the same, true. But at the same time, like I look around and I don't know. I think debate actually is really important. I think, and like unless you have like a disability, right, where you're like not able to debate because you have disabilities that are like severely wrecking your life, right? But like if you're assuming,
well, now I feel called out.
No, not you. Like just, but yeah, I think you should, because people who can't debate, people who they're almost, at least we're talking about like online people, content creators, journalists, politicians, anybody like that. If they can't debate and defend their position, they're probably lying to the public or lying to themselves. That's just just the reality. That's the world we live in. That is because it's always the people who run away and they go into their echo chambers and they never confront opposing views. They're so far off.
You don't even need a debate for that. You can have a discussion.
Yeah, you can have discussions. That's what a good debate can be, right? A good debate can be two people who disagree having a discussion. Yeah, or not even heated. You can be civil, but
I hear what you guys are saying. I completely disagree. I agree with. I hear what you're saying. I agree with parts of it, I should say. So I agree. Like, so a lot of the people in academia, they are very dry, especially the ones who are really doing like intense research projects. I don't know that they're the best person to stand up against like a Destiny type figure or whoever, somebody who can use rhetoric to their advantage, who's really good at public speaking, who's really good at thinking on their feet. I think Destiny could come off as a victor against somebody who is way more qualified because he knows that skill set, that debate skill set. I think it's two completely different things. I think they're two kind of different sides of the brain, if you will.
Yes,
like
but if
research
you're in
and
the same
analytical
field, let's take it the
well,
sort of
you could use your research and your
thing.
Well, they can debate in different ways too, right? They don't have to do like, it doesn't have to be a debate where they're like on a show with a moderator, right? It could be a debate where you publish an article, I publish an article, and you have these dueling articles replying to each other. You could do it so many different ways that might be better suited to the academic, for instance, right?
Yeah,
it definitely could
paper, counter paper, okay. And they point out
it
later,
could be, but I don't know that there's that requirement. Like when we look at all of the like great
podcasters, there's no requirement. Okay, you have absolutely no requirement. Okay, but I think the point would be the more entertaining, the more sensationalized, the more numbers. I'm sort of cheating, and maybe Douglas Murray was talking out of his ass when he was talking about how he approached that on a different podcast indirectly. But there's stuff to make me think that he definitely didn't use the right words with expertise. He even acknowledged on a different podcast that
I hope that's not his view, because it seems to be 180 from what he was saying in 2022 in regards to lived experience. But fair enough. He was also saying he also he also addressed the expert thing there too. Well, okay. But he's cited many people in now I'm forgetting essentially like the grievance studies type deal where they do have academic expertise in these areas. And he was saying that doesn't actually hold up to real world actual experience or knowledge. And he has debated numerous people and brought to light the fact that it seems like they don't want to actually have any sort of public debate. And fair enough, but I don't know that the academic types are necessarily required to do that. I think a lot of the times you kind of choose a champion and then they would use your academic research or your research, and then they would kind of champion it, and they could be, a little bit more skilled in the rhetorical department. I don't know that every academic is required to debate.
So no one's required, but again, we're sort of, there's sort of how things like are, right? And then there's how I think like we should be, and like how they should be.
Perceive it.
Well, I think the academics though have like kind of failed the public. Not like, yes, because I think they do need to be out there and having those conversations, and they should be going on Joe Rogan's show, and they should be talking about how I know you had this guy on last week. He talked about how the vaccines, kill people and cause autism and all this stuff or whatever. I don't know, fake example, right? But they said this on the show. I've spent, the past 30 years studying this, and, I found that that's not true. And I can explain to you how we came to that conclusion and walk Joe Rogan through it. Or, it could be something like that, right? I think the academics should be playing that role. And also Joe Rogan as a content creator, talk to whoever you want. You have free speech. Absolutely. Talk to whoever you want. I don't believe this no platforming bullshit, but the conversation should be different, right? You either have like a dueling conversation where it's like two people and they have different opinions, or you could have like, this week I'm going to talk to this vaccine skeptic, and this week I'm going to talk to this immunologist researcher, and you have both of the conversations, and at the very least, or you could do it like a third way, and where you push back hard on both, right? Either you do research ahead of time, or you have Jamie do research ahead of time, or you just get good at asking like tough questions and like recognize potential like points of weakness just from experience of doing a lot of interviews. There's so many different ways you could do it, but the way Joe does it is irresponsible, I think, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's about who he finds interesting. He's more personality based. And probably also a lot of this comes to who his friends recommend. They said Daryl Cooper has a podcast with Jocko, one of his longtime friends. So there's many elements at play here. Let's get back to the main point, or we might never get through this.
I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
I think that's exactly what they're doing. And the problem is that because your own platform has come about because you're a very successful comedian and much more, and you do ask questions and you are interested. But there are a lot of people who have come along.
I think what he's trying to say here is that they're using Joe. They know what he's interested in, conspiracy theories, and they're using that sort of to leverage his infamy to and having, like, I don't know this for sure, like they're suggesting, the people around Joe are suggesting like Dave Smith, oh yeah, why don't you have this guy? I don't know if any of that's happening. I think this is just what Murray's sort of thinking. Do you guys think I'm completely off on that?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, if you want to go on a show, you'll probably like try to tailor your message to the person hosting it to some extent. Like, that's just what everyone does.
Priming other guests and sort of hyping up your guest to your friends, okay, and putting
everyone does that.
On this.
I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe you
everyone
right?
does do
like
that.
A lot of
it's the typical networking thing, which can sort of, I think, have problem. The networking, defend this person, good faith them against all criticism, can turn extremely sour. I've seen it happen that way. Just completely disregard. I don't want to get into that, but do you understand where I'm coming from with that? Like, maybe they're both denying, they're both saying you're wrong, and they're probably right about him not understanding. He's not even attempting to seem to understand Cooper in general. He's just hyper focusing on pretty much the people coming down on Daryl Cooper and using him as an example of the type of person he's finding weird when they don't get counterbalance in the sort of platform. I think that's what his concern's about.
Right. He was just using that as an example. He didn't mean that to be like the primary point.
Yes.
But
I think
that's like his example of a non-expert, though, where, okay, so Joe Rogan had a bunch of different people that were kind of the opposite of what standard media's experts were saying. And, if you go back, so they're going to, in a minute, talk about the time that everything shut down that we can't talk about or whatever. But man, there were experts who turned out to be correct, that were actually on the Joe Rogan show, that were saying a bunch of different things. That
Weinstein was one of the people I was following at the time. I'm like, yeah, I like what he's saying. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm on Joe Rogan. He harped on it a little bit too much and got into the science a little bit too much for me to keep up with Brett Weinstein, personally.
There are places to get the standard expert's point of view. That hasn't changed. You can still get that from most network media. That's not exactly what Joe Rogan's platform is about. I think he has the right to platform anybody that he chooses to.
Right? It is about like the anti-vaccine stuff, because like he loves talking to these people, right?
Well, he happened to be right when it came to the COVID shit on a lot of what he said. I'm at a loss to come up with exactly what he was wrong about.
If you get to the right place with the wrong data, I'm not saying that Joe did. I'm just saying, if you get to the right place with the wrong data, that should still be accounted for. Okay. I'm not saying that's what Joe did or any of the experts. I do remember he did have someone talking about the vaccine on. He got pushed back, and he brought in an expert to sort of counter what his own guest did back then. And I thought that was good of Joe to do. But that was a while ago.
Yeah, like the experts get things wrong, right? Like during COVID, I think you could point to like various different aspects of like the keeping schools closed, for instance, I think was a mistake. And I think that like everybody recognizes it was now, but at the time it was a really contentious issue. But I was actually on the opening of the school side, so even I'm on the left, to be clear, but like the liberal, I guess. But I was on the personal side.
You point out that he should have the opposite on here. That's what Douglas Murray is doing. He's kind of taking I don't know what you'd call that, the expert opinion. He just wrote a book on it. He is definitely the pro-Israel side on this. He is having both people come in here to talk about it and to talk about, okay, what did they get wrong? And sadly, Murray doesn't take the chance to actually point out anything that they get wrong. I was really hoping for that in this exchange.
Well, and Joe wouldn't have Kamala Harris on.
No, that's not true. Joe.
Well, she didn't end up being
Kamala
on,
Harris
so
wanted him to come to her. If what I heard is correct, okay, she wouldn't be willing.
And there
to
was a
come
time
into
limit.
Yeah, there were mistakes on both sides, but I'm pretty sure Joe never really wanted to have that conversation. Is what my impression.
Well, you can't prove that, man. That's the thing about that. Okay, both sides. Kamala made it difficult.
It wouldn't have mattered anyway for the election, to be clear. I don't think.
Probably not. She wasted money on Fortnite.
Ray, you mentioned the you mentioned that you can go find these expert opinions, all right, in the mainstream media. But like, unfortunately, the world I think that we live in now is where, well, there's like completely different worlds, right? We all live in our own little echo chambers and bubbles, but which is like the problem. But like the people who watch Joe Rogan probably aren't like watching like on like the BBC World Service. They're or the New York Times or whatever, right? They're probably not. It's probably a very different. My impression at least is it's a very different audience. And like those people,
for sure,
if all they see or most of what they see, right? Because Joe will occasionally have on like people who push back, but it seems like, and again, I haven't watched a lot of Joe's content over the years. I used to watch him all the time, 5 years ago.
Yeah, same here.
But
I fell off when he went to Spotify. I don't know.
Yeah, me too. Actually, Spotify. That's when I stopped listening. But it seems like if you're watching his show, you might occasionally get like a guest who doesn't like hold the mainstream alternative viewpoint on everything, right? The alternative viewpoint, I guess, on everything instead of the mainstream one. You will occasionally encounter that, but for the vast majority of the guests he has on, and that's partly like the far left's fault too, or the left wing's fault too, because the left went a little crazy over during the woke stuff, and some of the woke people tried to pressure everybody into like not going on platforms like Joe Rogan, right? Because they're crazy, insane woke fucktards. They just should all fuck off. Who cares? But anyway, that's a whole separate discussion. So like, it wasn't entirely Joe's fault, or like these other people too, like Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, all these people, right? The fake centrist types. It's not entirely their fault.
You're showing your bias.
Yeah, true. But it's not entirely their fault, because there were like the people really wouldn't talk to them. That's true. But at the same time, if you're only watching those shows and you're only seeing the alternative explanation for everything, the conspiracy theory version of everything, and like, let's say 10% of the time the alternative explanation is right, but like,
and I would
the rest of the time it's not.
Exact thing for the left, like Hassan, you could make equal.
Oh yeah, sure. He's
Hassan here.
He's the exact opposite. He's the exact same, but on the other side for sure.
Yeah. How does he deal with his cope about misinformation? Okay, that's present misinformation in reality. See if I have anything good in this. Okay, let's continue with this for a bit. It's going sluggish.
Partly, I think, because they've come on this show, who have come along and they've decided, I can play this double game. On the one hand, I'm going to push really edgy and frankly sometimes horrific opinions, and then if you say that's wrong, they say I'm a comedian.
But wait a minute,
how can you tell me I'm just a comedian?
Well,
I'm just throwing stuff out.
What horrific opinions is wrong are you talking about?
See, I think Murray has this wrong anyways. They don't use they use it's my opinion typically, and not I'm a comedian.
Can't he say a damn example of who is saying this? When did they say this? Because without that, it sounds like he's throwing the accusation at Dave, and Dave has never fallen back on that. Hey, I'm just a comedian. It's not like the Jon Stewart thing. Like, I'm sure you guys remember the Daily Show. It seemed like anytime Jon Stewart kind of was struggling in an issue, he'd be like, well, I'm just a comedian. I have not seen
there's
Dave
an interview where he might be absolutely. Murray could be projecting something he used as a literal example of Russell Brand doing on a particular show, and Jon Stewart, both those on a particular podcast I saw him going on. I don't know if it's fair to bring that in there. I just thought I'd...
Well, I don't know who he's talking about. I assume it's Dave because Dave is a comedian, but like I said, I've seen Dave do that once, and that was like the first time that he was asked to kind of do like a live debate thing, and it was on Sam Cedar's show, Minority Report.
I mean, I agree. Murray should be like, okay, I don't know if this is the case for you, Dave, but I've seen someone like Russell Brand do this, and he had the same sort of status that you did. So that's might be why I'm crossing my wires there. And the same thing with Jonathan Jon Stewart back in the day. He used both those people as an example. The question is, did he have this thought in his mind? He just didn't vocalize it during this conversation with Joe and Dave? Or did he post hoc go back and use those two examples afterwards? That's the question I would have for that.
Sucks, because if there is somebody doing that, and if they were a part of Joe Rogan, like any show or any guest on there, that sucks. I have not seen Daryl Cooper do that. I'm not as familiar with Ian Carroll. I know a little bit of his work, but again, these people have said explicitly, like, I am not an expert in this subject. Like, I'm not, what would you call it? I guess not bona fide. They're not like supported by some university or anything like that.
Enthusiastic about history. I like going through history.
But I've never heard them retreat to, I'm not an expert, so you can't really hold my feet to the fire. I'm an enthusiast. They have prefaced it with like, okay, so I'm not an expert, but I'm somebody who's very passionate about this. This is what I've found from my research. And I feel like that's perfectly acceptable.
I hate when you have to go disclaimer all the time. It's just makes me think of one of those commercials, like those Claritin commercial, any of those drugs commercial. And call this a straw man if you want, or a hyperbolic example. They say all the wonderful things in this life, and at the very end, they may cause constipation, diarrhea, blah blah blah. Make sure you get the advice from your doctor before you do this. Real quick before the end of the pharmaceutical commercial. It's a probably over the top, hyperbolic sort of comparison to that. I just thought I'd put that out.
Well, I guess earlier, Gray, you mentioned, like we're talking about the we're gonna get stuck on this forever. The World War II thing, Churchill starting World War II, right?
Yeah.
I guess like fundamentally, I guess the problem is that it's like it's not that it's not that it's even hyperbolic and like, hey, look, this is what I came to in my research, right? I've spent this time researching. This is my opinion. I guess it's just like he's just wrong. Right. And then like people who listen to him are gonna like have like the wrong takeaway. Like even if like he's like, look, the Bengal famine and the bombing of Dresden and all this is so horrible. And then, even if like that's what he like lays out, right? At the end of the day, he's still wrong about World War II.
I feel like it sucks. Like I'm not here to champion Daryl Cooper or anything like that. Like I feel like it's a super hyperbolic statement, and I don't know every bit of the ins and outs of why he would say something that like I don't know, hyperbolic. Why you'd want to try and start a feud with a pretty well loved character. Like I think if you're gonna call like Margaret Thatcher or something like that, like I feel like you'd get a lot more support. Where Churchill is held to such reverence. So I don't know. It sucks. I'm not doing a great job of championing him because I don't share his same views. But
to be clear,
I understand. It's good that you're coming and trying to put it out there.
No, I agree. For sure.
I think if this was a debate, this would definitely be failing. I don't know exactly. I think he's doing this warm-up act, trying to get a gauge on these two people by using this, and it does make him come off as elitist, but he's fine with coming off as elitist. Way too cocky, and that's going to put off a lot of people. I jumped ahead a little bit because I have a
and Murray does need to. Murray should have done more research.
Are we missing anything else? Greg, you need to get.
I'm not sure where it starts with. I guess I'll let you know once you start.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead because I put a graphic here to maybe help understand that I came across in my research.
It was bullshit propaganda. Absolutely. And it's all lies. And this is a real danger when the establishment and the institutions are all caught with their pants down, having sold a bunch of very consequential policies based on lies. And then once people realize that, they go, well, what else have they been lying to me about? And then they almost want to look into every single thing. Yeah. I think the whole thing was lies. Now, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think both of them agree on this, and I'm going to put this up.
There's danger in that. And I think that there are some things that then people jump to conclude.
Had something to say.
I was just saying, I think he's just talking about COVID now and kind of how the experts were kind of wrong in there and people kind of jumped into that. So,
well,
fair enough.
There were, but like, what do you think? Do you think that like the COVID vaccines caused like large numbers of excess deaths in Europe?
It doesn't seem to be the case, but there is some interesting data that I'm not sure we've gotten all of it. Like those initial claims do seem to be
it through.
And then they seem to have walked it back. Like initially, like it was supposed to make it so that you couldn't get the disease. And then you won't be able to get it again. And then they've just kind of walked back what each of these is supposed to do. At this point, I don't know. I wish a lot of the data was a little bit more out in the public point, whatever you want to call that.
And
like,
they just admit to it,
guys, so that people could look into it further. Sadly, I don't feel like we will get an answer on it, but it doesn't seem like it's killing a bunch of people. Otherwise, I think we'd have more information pointing to that.
Yeah, I think it's just.
But that is what Jordan Peterson believes, right? I don't know if
he had
a
verse
show or not.
He had a verse effect too. He had a lot of mental trouble during the time, and probably got he got really sick for a while there. I think that's what caused his sort of weird turn. He was really sick for a long time, but I wouldn't contest to that because who knows what's true nowadays. But yeah, continue.
That are totally wrong. But I guess I tend to look at that and go, well, then maybe the people with power, not random podcasters, but like the people with real power, should do a better job of not lying through their fucking teeth about everything.
Well, maybe you have power. Maybe you have power, both of you.
Yeah. If you want a truth to power, I think you have a responsibility. If you want to stick it truth to power, you should have a responsibility to, have some standards, especially when you have such a voice to sway public. Because Douglas Murray, I believe, agrees with a lot of people that Joe Rogan probably has more social capital, more ability to sway the public than a lot of these discredited Fox, CNN, MSNBC. A lot of people trust a lot of things he says. Would anyone disagree with that? At least a certain side of the audience would do that. But that goes the same with anyone within their own bubble. Just Joe is a particular place where he definitely seems like he's very fair, but worried about pushing bad ideas.
Well, by that same token, wouldn't Murray have some sort of obligation to come in here with like any sort of fact, any sort of example, anything? Like, doesn't he have a responsibility?
Oh, he did use one, right? He used the World War II guy.
But even then, he didn't really use a fact. He just said, like, this guy hasn't debated this other guy, so he's not an expert. And then he comes in and says, you have on people who say these wild claims, and then they retreat to, I'm a comedian. Okay, who's he talking about? What is he talking about?
No, I know.
I think he's just talking in a bunch of generalities.
He explains it in an interview. He does it in a different interview later on. He didn't think
that's totally helpful when he's on this giant audience that you're talking about, this giant thing that could sway public opinion, known as the Joe Rogan Experience. That's awesome that he gave the facts on a different podcast at a different time.
Well, look, but Vincent and I both, I think, agree with you that like Douglas didn't do a good job, at least in the start.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely would have been great if he would have brought up that Russell Brand example and Jonathan Stewart. Would have been lovely, great. It would have been clear to the point. Was it a choice he made to be a little bit vague to sort of see if they come to the same connection, or did he legitimately come up with it post hoc? Okay, to explain his "I'm just a comedian" line and the expert. Again,
it sucks because he gets into some of this at the end, but man, it sucks. I like Douglas Murray. I've enjoyed a bunch of his debates. I think this is one of his worst performances, and it sucks because he was there to advertise his book. I don't know that this advertised it that well to the Joe Rogan audience.
Yeah, we don't even know what his book is. I don't, at least.
Yeah, you probably won't read it. But Wick got on Temple. You should be proud of that man.
We live in an era where podcasters have a lot of power.
Russian money, bro. I would not.
Oh God!
Hey, look, if he invites me on, I'd go on there. But I'd fight him on it, sure.
But he didn't know it was Russian money, Tachyon.
Well, that's what he says. Even though it was content, it's a whole thing. Anyway, please, I don't want to cut.
Yeah, sorry.
If you go on a podcast with Jake Shields, and Jake Shields goes on to another podcast and says he doesn't think 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, what do you think's happening there? That's an exercise of power. Okay. And I agree with you about the breakdown of trust. Absolutely. We have lived through an era where, in real time, we saw something called a conspiracy, the lab leak, which turns out to be true, as you and others said it might be from the beginning.
Well, it took 4 years.
It took 4 years. And I've said repeatedly, it's kind of inevitable to me that if you see something that is called a racist conspiracy theory fall apart and become also what we used to call true in a few years, it's likely to blow a lot of people's minds. But the question then is, do you help those minds that have been blow themselves out some more by doing a whole load of other conspiracy stuff? Do you decide to go, hey, what else have we been lied to? Maybe Churchill wasn't a great guy. Maybe Hitler wasn't such a bad.
Okay. About this particular point, what are the thoughts? I think he doesn't establish any of these people he used as examples do this. It's a little bit hard, probably.
Well,
but
so he does mention Jake Shields. So Jake Shields is I think he's now former UFC fighter. I don't think he's allowed in UFC anymore. But he's a dude who's had a lot of brain injury, and dude, this guy gets on Twitter and he goes hard. But he has definitely done some kind of revisionist history, some Holocaust denial shit. But Joe Rogan knows him from his time in the UFC when, you know, he used to commentate on his fights and stuff. So he has brought him in, I think, on a fight companion thing. But man, that seems to be the first like accurate one to me that he's really pointed out. Like, yeah, that dude seems like he is bad news as far as the views that he is portraying out there. And it might be, again, because it's on Twitter, he's being super, I don't know, hyperbolic or something. But with him, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like he is saying these really egregious things because he actually believes it, not just to get people riled up or whatever. To me, that one definitely seems indefensible, other than he knows this guy and he's asking him to comment on something that he seems to be an expert on. Like, he hasn't brought him in to talk about the Jews or something. He's brought him in to talk about UFC, like one of those fight companions.
Yeah,
things.
but if he just slipped in one of these ahistorical facts and Joe didn't push back on it, it would seem a little bit weird knowing everything you just laid out there. Correct?
Right. Yes, I would. Yes.
And the dude seems like cancer. Like, you don't want to get anywhere near that guy. For sure. I understand. Okay. So I think Murray has a good point with that. And I think if he brought up stuff like that, like, you've given this guy a platform, he said these horrible things. Yeah, I think he should answer for that and why he feels comfortable still associating with Jake Shields after everything that he's kind of done.
One thing that Murray's bringing up too, I think is like worth pointing out, is like the breakdown in trust. Like, yes, a lot of people are turning to people like Joe Rogan, right? Because they don't trust the mainstream, right? They don't trust what CNN is telling them. They don't trust what Fox News is telling them. They want someone
alternative media.
Yeah, alternative media.
Be real, be honest. But if people are just coming in for ulterior motives and slipping in something here and there, just like a little thing here and there would be a certain argument for it. Not sure if it's psychological relevant. I would need exact examples.
And maybe it's because like people have sides, but I think that like what's happening is that like people will see the mainstream get a story wrong, so they really turn away from those mainstream outlets, and for like understandable reasons.
And I've seen people,
but then they'll trust. It seems like yeah, you do have that phenomena. They even talk about it, right? Where you're like, well, what else are they lying to me about? And you go down this like rabbit hole. And it could take you anywhere, right? It could take you to like a super far left Hassan Piker, you know, the Houthis are right to attack cargo ships, you know, or it can take you, you know, to the far right. It's like the Jews are responsible for everything, or you know, hyperbolic jokes about World War II and Hitler, or Winston Churchill being like the true villain. You know, it can take you like down all these different like rabbit holes, but people don't analyze those critically either. It's like they'll criticize like the mainstream media and have like good criticisms, but then like they won't apply
until
that
it gets to a certain
to
threshold. People don't really notice these things being sort of slipped in. And Murray thinks it's more of a feeling that these guys are similar, I think, to this. It's just really a feeling, and there's probably a reason for this. Let me let this play a little bit more. I have the graphic in here.
The Holocaust.
Nobody is saying that. No one is saying maybe Hitler wasn't such a bad guy.
You are saying that.
No one's saying that.
In the 1930s, Hitler kept the anti-Semitism down.
No. That's not what he's saying. What he was saying is that he didn't do it as publicly. He was doing it in meetings because the support for that kind of thinking wasn't as ubiquitous as it was.
See, and this is Douglas Murray disagreeing with that take from Daryl Cooper here.
I've seen this before. I know exactly what these guys are drinking. They're drinking a couple of very, very discredited historians.
Okay, here's what I want to put into this, which he doesn't get into, and definitely is a flaw for the actual show here. But this, oh, is this the wrong one? No, I think this is one of the people that he uses.
Historians like David Irving, and they are just
David Irving. Okay, he's comparing Daryl Cooper to this guy, and it's Wikipedia, not the greatest source. I think they use it at some point. I'm trying to get down to the point. You guys can see this, right? I haven't lost connection.
I probably will be getting off pretty soon, though. I have to work tomorrow morning.
Got it. Well, it's good for anyone to come by. Maybe I'll get into a little bit of the meat with some of the take. But any thoughts about this particular thing? It's Wikipedia. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I don't. No thoughts.
Nothing?
But I'll probably head out.
Oh wow, that up. Okay, got it.
Well, I thought we were going to 11 EST, but we can.
It's up to you to jump out. I have something. This is not very productive. I mean, we got into the meat of it, but this is the guy he's comparing him to. And there's another thing. I guess I put it a little bit later. They even go check this particular thing here before I move on to the next section. Okay, this idea is not new. This is the response to Tucker Carlson, I believe. David Irvin. They brought up Pat Buchanan piled on with Churchill, and Mises Institute is interesting. If you're heading out, plug yourself up, plug yourself out.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me, Vincent. It's been great. Actually, this was a really fun discussion. I'm really glad we did this. And I know it was kind of weird at some points, but I think it was good. And Gray, it was good to see you again. I think we had some good conversation there too.
For sure.
I'm glad
you back at you. Awesome talking to you again.
Yeah, I think it's good to have pushback on these things and not just be we've done a couple of these with Vincent and I have where we didn't have any opposition, so it's good to have someone there who has a different way of seeing things.
It makes you think a little bit harder. And Gray didn't help himself in some place. You just reflectively, but I'm sure you're joking. Wink.
All right. So anyway, if you want to check me out, I'm Tacky on Blue, Kevin McDonald. I've written The People of Gamergate, volumes 1 and 2 are both out now. I'm also going to be running a Kickstarter campaign in the next few months for Champions of Alanthea, exploring the world of multi-user dungeons and documenting gaming history through interviews with players of Dragon Realms and Gemstone 4, 2 different multi-user dungeons from the 1980s and 90s that are still running to this day. Really exciting, preserve gaming history. And also check out The People of Gamergate, gamergatebook.com and tachyonblue.com. Have a good night, and thanks for having me.
Have a good night. Okay, gonna switch. Yep, gonna switch over to this particular thing. Do you know PF Chung? Ever heard of him?
Oh yeah.
Okay. He did
the
a
dude
video
who
on
took
this.
up the enlightened centrist position. I think he's now looking to get rid of that, but or took up the mantle of the enlightened centrist.
I think he tried to steal the radical centrist from me. Well, let's give a look.
Not radical. He went with enlightened. He is enlightened, sir.
Yeah, but he was playing with the radical centrist thing in a few videos. I'm like, hey, I did that. Just because you don't know who I am, because I'm absolute no one. Let's get some context from a third party.
You're the Michelangelo centrist radical.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly the joke in that. Thank you for recognizing that, and I don't have to keep this up anymore because I assume this is on YouTube. It's good.
Here is the part of the debate that's been causing most of the discourse, I would say.
And they've decided I can play this double game. On the one hand, I'm going to push really edgy and frankly sometimes horrific opinions. And
I heard this already.
How can you tell me I'm just a comedian? Well,
this is absolutely true.
Okay, so this is my point.
He just leaves it. This is absolutely true. Someone who just agrees with him without any backing. I find that a little bit interesting, don't you?
I don't know if interesting's the word. I'm hoping that he explains more.
He'll explain more, yeah.
Sadly, Murray does not.
Yeah, as I said, a post-hoc explanation for it. Russell Brand, Jon Stewart.
Right, Jelly. It's a shape-shifting thing. Comedian or historian?
He's not a comedian.
Historian or podcast? Would-be historian or actual historian? You say he doesn't claim to be a historian, but
we're talking about Daryl Davis here. The broader point of this discourse is it's really lame to posit yourself as not even an expert, to posit yourself as someone who talks about an issue quite a bit and then retreat into the, well, I'm just a comedian when it suits you. It's a form of lie, okay? And it's what's known as the Jon Stewart defense, made famous by one Jon Stewart.
Be doing debate, which would be great. No, it's not honest. What you do is not honest. What you do is partisan hackery. And I'll tell you why I know. Carry on your show and you sniff his throne, and you're accusing us of partisan hackery? Absolutely. You've got to be kidding, man. You're on CNN. The show that leads into me is puppets making crank phone calls.
So he didn't directly say I'm a comedian, okay? He alluded to it. So it's not a direct parallel, I think.
I don't know, saying like, it's puppets making crank phone calls that lead into my show. You have to be a different standard. I don't know, man. That does seem to be the retreat to me. I think Paul or PF Young shows a good one for that. I think it really does prove the point. I don't know who Murray is talking about. Is he trying to do a jab at Dave Smith, who I assume he's talking about because he is a comedian? Or is he trying to allude to like Daryl Cooper? It would be nice if he backed it with any sort of actual accusation and then any evidence of it. But instead, it's just kind of this blanket statement of, you have people that do this. And it's like, cool, who, when?
Yes, the Jelly Man. And they're just reflectively going against him. He doesn't do that. Smith doesn't do that. No one you're accusing. Yes, there are people who do that. Murray thinks that, I would assume, maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, that he's pretty much saying they have a more refined sort of version of this where they can retreat to podcaster, historian for Tucker, and for Dave Smith, expert debater for what position? Just anti-war, I guess, but it's sort of is more supportive of the pro-Palestine people. The argument that...
No. He's anti-war. So he is for free market. He is for Rothbardian values. So it would be, free markets. It would be anti-war. But he's not specifically ever said, like, I'm pro-Palestine.
Argument Dave Smith uses. Who would that help? Would it help the pro-Palestine side more? Dave Smith's argument, or would it help the pro-Palestine argument?
Do you think that's the only war that's going on currently in this entire world? Like, yes, in that one particular instance, it would actually help out both sides in theory if you could get both of them to agree to non-war. But yes, it does seem like that would probably help out the Palestinians more currently, seeing as how they're getting slaughtered a lot more.
That's the only thing I want to establish. Who does his arguments benefit in that? I'm not saying anything that's his intention for it, but someone with way more skeptical, which Murray probably is, probably sees it as that. You can understand that at least, right? Okay.
Sorry, my dog was barking. I don't know if that would necessarily be more skeptical. I agree with you that I think that's how Murray sees
cynical,
it. I don't know if I would call that cynical. Yeah, I'll go with cynical.
Okay. Sometimes people don't always pick the exact right word. I'm infamous for using the wrong word and sometimes getting the names backwards. So I know how that is.
Oh, what is wrong with you? Well,
So that is what Douglas Murray is critiquing, and he's correct about that, where it's irresponsible and it's a form of lie to knowingly have the level of influence that you have, like Jon Stewart knows he has, and Dave Smith knows he has, and then retreating to, well, I'm just a comedian. I just, hang out at nightclubs and tell jokes. It's like, he does do that, to be fair, like that is his job. But at a certain point, you reach a threshold level of mimetic significance where to say, I'm just a comedian.
Oh, God. his metamedics. Have you seen any of his stuff on memeology or that the sort of Richard Dawkins sort of meme theory? Nothing on that, Gray?
Sorry, dogs again. And then I thought that I was unmuted when I was muted. So then I was talking to myself after I got the dogs to shut up. I'm familiar with it. I think I watched his first video on it. If he's done more on it, I unfortunately did not catch it. But I know what he's talking about with the memetics. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm familiar with it, but I could be more familiar with some of Jung's work.
It's more about spreading your idea. The concept that memes are just an effective form of spreading ideas very easily. And there's some truth to it. I think he gets a little bit too into the weeds with it, probably for comic effect. The sort of a light and centrist fruit, that's was a meme with Stitch and Adam. So he sort of uses that meme also, and he might move on. But yes, memes are effective means to sort of affect people with ideas. That's the idea behind that.
It's a lie. I mean, you're not. You are an influential person, and so all of the points about.
Okay, skipping him some for the sake of time.
Our defense minister.
This is Dave's best point, and in Chung's opinion,
Israel they were begging Qatar to pour that money into Hamas.
No, that's not what happened.
Well, that's what he said.
Yeah,
his words, begging.
You're referring to the funding of Hamas in the 2010s.
Yes.
Yeah. No, the Qataris poured the money in, and the question on the Israeli side was, what are you allowed to do with funds that were going into Gaza? And the Israelis allowed the funds to go from Qatar to Gaza.
Well, I think a little bit more than that. I think when the funds dried up, Netanyahu sent the head of Mossad in there to beg him to keep the funds going.
Yeah, what they're talking about here is the fact that Benjamin.
And I think I keep forgetting his name myself. Yeah, Jung. Like he was one of the Jordan Peterson people who followed in the footsteps of Jordan Peterson and Jung. I think that's how it's pronounced. So yeah,
Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government funded and propped up Hamas. This is an indisputable fact. One important thing to notice.
I think he's actually incorrect. They support it. The theory is they support it. Quantan, however you say that country, they supported Hamas getting the money from them. I didn't see anything in my research about them actually begging. But yeah, he uses
funded
here
and propped up Hamas. This is an indisputable fact. One important thing to notice here, right? Let's do some vibes-based analysis. Douglas Murray is known for being very, shoulders straight. These buffoons, these idiots, these fools. And look at his body language in this when he knows he's trying to defend the indefensible.
Again, I'm not sure it's like quick.
See, I don't like this particular thing. Maybe Douglas Murray does not actually believe the sort of idea that Jung here has latched onto. Guys, any thoughts of that, Gray, or not? Okay. A little bit should come back.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. But that's not the evidence of the last 18 years.
I mean, it's wrong. Okay. So I guess I think I'm allowed to quote powerful people when they admit what they're doing. I mean, it's
I know. But again, I mean, it's just an interesting thing because again, it's a discipline about this, which is, do I only quote powerful people when they say the odd thing that I agree with, or do I simultaneously distrust all powerful people? It's just an interesting
thing. Never mind the fact that he's not addressing the fact that the Netanyahu government propped up Hamas, right, in order to delegitimize the Palestinian Authority, so that there is no partner for peace. The whole reason that Israel can claim that, well, we don't have anyone to negotiate with because all that we have is Hamas. Well, here's the Bezalel Smotrich, the current finance minister of Israel, talking about how they view Hamas.
במשחק הזה של הדה-לגיטימציה, תחשבו על זה לרגע, הרשות הפלסטינית היא נטל וחמאס הוא נכס, הוא ארגון טרור, אף אחד לא יכיר בו, אף אחד לא ייתן לו מעמד ב-ICC, אף אחד לא ייתן לו להוביל החלטה במועצת הביטחון, ואז נצטרך וטו אמריקאי או לא נצטרך וטו אמריקאי, אני לא בטוח שלה...
Right, so this is the Smotrich. This is the current...
Okay, I meant to pause that a little bit sooner. This is from 2015. Here.
Yeah. Well, that was also when Dave was talking about how they.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's generally
Dave
how it goes with history. I mean, it is generally in the past where you'd use people's quotes. Like when Dave was talking about they called them an asset, it wasn't currently. I mean, I don't think you'd currently call that an asset as of right now.
Okay, he's making a sort of conspiratorial argument here that from my research, this is the best evidence, and this is in 2015. And I believe it goes up to 2018 when they officially, I don't know if they did things under the books, sort of supported Qatar, I believe it's pronounced that way, sent money to Hamas. And they seemed supportive of it and even transferred the funds. Okay. This policy could have been, I hear Netanyahu got criticism for this when he supported it before he was actually prime minister, I believe, before he was in power. But at the end of the day, this is using just supposedly reported thing from Netanyahu in 2012. And this particular quote. And that could have changed. Do you think that matters in the end?
Well, I would like to point out one thing that what Douglas Murray is doing here is saying, like, okay, you've got this one quote that you're pulling out, and that's it.
Yeah.
What was he doing with Daryl Cooper? He wasn't bringing out like his entire body of work. It was one quote. If he thinks that is off limits, why is he using the exact same tactic? It really it sucks.
Because there's things to back up his point. If you actually research,
he didn't bring one of them, though.
He didn't bring it onto the podcast.
And there is more to back up Dave's point here. Well, there's more to back up Dave's point here than one simple quote. It feels like they're very analogous, but it is unacceptable for Dave to do this, but it's perfectly acceptable for Douglas Murray to do this. And there's quite a few times that this kind of happens throughout this debate. I wanted to point that out because they don't draw attention to it in this actual thing. But what he's accusing Dave doing is the exact same tactic that he used.
But I don't think Douglas Murray has that outing, that he's just a normal guy. I'm sure if he gets something wrong, he would sort of correct it.
Maybe nobody used that out. That's a weird straw man thing. So he didn't bring up that this guy is not an actual expert on it. So he has pulled that ripcord. And, when things got dicey, he said, I'm not doing that. Cool. Nobody in this situation that we're talking about has done that. I don't know who he was referring to. I think that was supposed to be a slap at Dave Smith. But again, without any examples or any evidence, it doesn't seem to be even remotely able to stick.
I agree. It is not clear within that
who he's talking about. But right now, he is claiming that Dave is cherry picking these quotes. Cool. That's exactly what Douglas Murray did. He has this one quote. And then they asked him, okay, have you looked into anything of his? He's like, I tried to, but I couldn't. So he has this one quote.
The one
is that not exactly what he's talking about
from Daryl Cooper that he was criticized over? It's proven that they keep on rehashing these ideas. They keep bringing them back. It's not something new Cooper found. It's something that has been argued over and over. He's using definitely his experience, like when he talked to Dave about Pat Buchanan's debate over a similar point in the past. Yes, within the actual episode, it's not there, but if you look into the criticisms of Cooper, you'll sort of get an idea where Douglas Murray is coming from. But you need the additional research. And yeah, I agree when he's criticizing Joe Rogan for not bringing on people to sort of push back, not bringing up that particular evidence to Joe Rogan. It was definitely a mistake, at least in the moment. But yeah, I'm bringing up this and just wanted to put that context in. You might have more that I forgot about.
Smoked Rich. This is the current head.
התוכנית שהציג אתמול הנשיא טראמפ היא התשובה האמיתית ל7 לאוקטובר. מי שביצע את הטבח...
In coalition government, this is the terrorist Israeli government that funded Hamas to prop them up in order to delegitimize the Partners for Peace. The government that funded Hamas to prop them up in order to delegitimize the Partners for Peace. Right? Because if only Hamas is there, then they don't have to make a deal. And Douglas Murray knows that. All right, hold on. Let's review the comments. Are we still live?
Yeah, he had problems with that, I guess. Some little things here and there. I mean, this is
when they admit things.
This is probably the best usage of my time since we were taking so long, and this is a little bit shorter because he does a good job. What he thinks Dave Smith's best point, Douglas's best point, the sort of how the public is viewing it. And I haven't seen this all. I've just watched up to this particular point.
Things that are like very against their interest to admit and kind of give away the whole game that now they're pretending doesn't
Are you sure,
matter.
are you sure whether it's the CIA or Mossad that it isn't just if they say something that you happen to want?
Again, master debater here, Douglas Murray, making a complete bullshit point about, well, you only quote people when it suits you.
Would be the case.
Well, this is kind of like saying if I were to end on trial and I were to, like, on the prosecution and I'd enter into evidence a written confession by the defendant, and you go, well, are you only entering this in because this kind of goes along with your case? Like, I suppose we're all.
I also don't. Greg Ray, I'm going to need your help with this particular thing. What is with his Dave Smith's comebacks here? I do not get them.
Well, it really is kind of stupid being like, yeah, but you're only picking points that support your argument. It's like, no shit, that's what everybody is doing. Again, I would throw it right back at Murray that,
sort of,
hey, are you
against him?
Well, how many times did Murray quote Daryl Cooper to bring back that one person? How many times did he quote him to make sure that his points didn't match Murray's point? How many times did he use him as the opposite of what Murray was trying to say? He only used that one point that supports his pre-planned agenda. That's what almost anyone does. So Dave likened it to a trial. That would be like saying, okay, in your defense trial, you're cherry picking stuff that helps you defend your case. It's like, yeah, no shit. That's literally what everyone's doing. So he tried to simplify it so that everybody could understand. I understand it did not work in this case for you, but that's okay. He tried to bring
compatible.
it to
It's really like comparing apples to oranges, in my opinion. Okay. It's totally
not really.
Content.
It's kind of a dumb point that, like, hey, you're not using all these other quotes that don't support your case. I don't know who does that. Who makes the opposite case when they're making their own case?
It's just Dave Smith's comparison is for the audience. You're saying it's for the audience sake. He's trying to translate what he thinks.
Yeah, they're definitely not talking to each other at this point. But I think that started with Murray from the beginning.
I don't place blame. I agree that neither one, they're talking past each other most of this debate or a discussion. I keep getting that debate mindset.
And I do like the point that Young actually grabbed. It's from much later in the actual debate when they actually get into something. But I don't know why it took them an hour and a half to get past this. Like, well, you shouldn't be grabbing quotes that only agree with your side. It's like, why? If I'm trying to make a case, why wouldn't I grab things that support my case? I don't know. I don't see Murray doing the thing that he's claiming that should be done.
Okay. You're not seeing it. Went through it. I could agree. There's a couple of times he definitely seemed to be counterproductive. That whole beginning felt like feeling each other out to sort of see where their baseline understanding is before he gets into what he's trying to do. It's a problem when you have, it seems like you're trying to do multiple things at the same time. It's rather confusing to see, at least from an audience perspective. I will agree with that.
Guilty of having these incentives to some degree, but I do think it's a relevant detail that the former defense secretary admitted this. And by the way, Netanyahu's admitted this, Ehud Barak has admitted this.
They admitted that they allowed funds to go from Qatar to Hamas because Hamas
was
the Gaza.
For the purpose, like you just saw in that clip, Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, for the purpose of propping up Hamas and delegitimizing.
For the reason of preventing these.
Yeah, that's his take on it. And that definitely there is some evidence to support that. Is that the only thing? We don't know. So I would like to know Douglas Murray answer. Why does he think
doesn't
this
get
is
into
an
it?
illegitimate point? Yes. He doesn't
they keep
pursue it down.
sidestepping it. Yeah, I think he does call it illegitimate, and then it just sucks because instead of engaging with anything, it's just a whole bunch of sidestepping, and it sucks. I haven't noticed that from Murray in the past. I was really rooting for him. Like I don't really have a dog in this fight. I've enjoyed a lot of Douglas Murray's debates and explanation speeches in the past. I've thought they've been really hard hitting. I think this is one of the most ineffective conversations I've seen from either side. The people in Joe Rogan's comments, they're basically saying that Murray lost this, but almost nobody is saying that Dave Smith won this. It's just, man, there is a lot of rhetoric going around.
There's a lot of people on X saying Dave Smith totally whiffed it. Okay. General sentiment. Okay. Yes.
I don't know what you mean by a lot, because the vast majority of the comments on Joe Rogan's, which again would be,
but are they making
Dave Smith, he is a regular
arguments?
Guest.
Like, okay.
So what they're saying is Douglas Murray lost this, and it's all based off of Douglas Murray. I understand that sentiment. It really sucks. I don't feel like Murray engaged in a lot. He kind of got into it towards the end, but he was not his best form in this. It seems like a lot of it is these kind of rhetorical things. And yeah, as Charles is pointing out, as long as the internet is keeping score. Yeah, I mean, I was able to find videos from like Destiny saying that Murray completely like wiped the floor with Dave Smith. And then I saw Hamas's poster boy, Dave Smith, gets completely owned. I think that was like
I saw Breaking Point's pretty much
thumbnail or something. But a lot of these other ones are saying that Dave Smith just absolutely destroyed Douglas Murray. And I don't see that on either side. I see two people who really were talking past each other. And sadly, I think a lot of the, I don't know what you'd call it, breaks or weird rhetorical devices that Murray is using really stifled this conversation instead of allowing it to actually take place. Because I think there's a lot of points that Murray could have really, really cleaned house with, but he did not use any of those to his advantage. So it sucks. It's one of those internet really conversations that should have been better.
Maybe it should have been. Maybe it was just a statement, and Murray was sort of taking a certain. I agree. This is complete tactic. This feels like complete tactics from Murray, acting like he's above this. And he does point out a few things, I think, within this debate overall that, Dave Smith completely sidesteps. But again, as you said, Murray just completely dismisses some things from Dave. Like what I think Jung here has a particular view about this being an indefensible position from Murray, which is more of a moral argument, but he probably exists more in the moral realm. Jung, Jordan Peterson fan, that's Jung's perspective.
Establishment of a Palestinian state.
No, that was not the case.
That is what Netanyahu said. That is what Ehud Barak said. It's all up and down.
One claim. There's one recording of Netanyahu saying something along those lines.
One recording of Netanyahu saying something along those lines. So
that is correct.
Here, Douglas Murray is straight up. To be fair, he's trying to defend the indefensible. That's why his shoulders kind of leaned in tight. I know I can't really get this here because Netanyahu is scum. I don't even know. I don't even know what his opinion is because there's many pro-Zionist people who hate Netanyahu. So you don't need to be defending Netanyahu to make his pro-Israeli side. And yet Douglas Murray is trying to defend the indefensible.
Like that's sort of telling to me that he thinks defending Netanyahu is indefensible. I don't know the facts of it. I just really hate that attitude. That somehow a leader having to make hard decisions. And maybe he is indefensible. But that strikes me the wrong way here.
So that's that important part. Now, what's the next part here? What did I have written down?
I didn't know that P.F. Young was a body language expert.
And elsewhere is what it is.
Yeah, that always weirds me out when people go with the body expertise. It always sounds like an ass pull to me. Okay, look at his body language. I'm like, maybe he's throwing that out intentionally. Maybe you're misreading him. It seems like Dunning-Kruger to me, but.
Could you have like messed up your shoulder the day before so you're kind of slouching to one side? Like I don't know. I mean, fair enough. It does seem like he has more of a proud posture right there, where when he was doing that defense, it did seem like he was in more of a defensive pose. But I don't know. I'm no expert in that. I got no clue what's going on there.
None of us are. None of us are. But it's a good highlight.
Well, which it is in the North in particular, but also in Rafa.
I'm sure there are experts in body language, but most of them are con artists. Who
I only know box
okay, maybe
office
I shouldn't
experts.
generalize it. I'm sure that the big wigs of that sort of stuff probably work for people who pay them very well, should I say, if they don't have a record and can get into that. But not an expert here either.
Elsewhere is what it is because every time the IDF went into an area where they had told the civilians to leave, the Hamas terrorists.
Pausing so I don't get copyright struck. He's going to point out that Hamas has booby-trapped every like third or fourth house in Gaza. And so what happens when there's explosives in all these houses? Well, what happens when Israel airstrikes the area? Secondary explosions, daisy chains. It's a part of the reason that Gaza is as destroyed as it is because of Hamas, no doubt. And probably I do not do a good enough job of when I do criticize Israel.
You do a better job than me. So I don't get into this stuff, man. Sheesh. Just from the rhetorical perspective, I find this debate very interesting. And I do believe maybe Murray did a little bit damage by his sort of cold opening. But even he sort of was like, a lot of people are defending Murray's point better than Murray did on a lot of things. I will say that.
I feel like both sides of the internet are defending the points better than both of the actual debaters did. The internet has pointed out, so I'm sure you've seen the clip going around the internet. I know it's got millions of views already, but it's basically Douglas Murray debating Douglas Murray, where he's bringing up the whole point of essentially standpoint epistemology and why lived experience isn't a necessity. And yet when he brings up well, have you ever been there? That is essentially
I think that's
going
a straw
with,
man. Okay, that was not a completely fleshed out idea. It's like, have you ever been there? So you know the geography. It's not about a lived experience. It's about knowing the actual.
But it's not like he
culture.
went there on his own. He went there as part of the IDF. So I'm sorry, but you're going to get a biased point of view of what's happening
you
there.
You can make that argument. Okay, you can make the argument he went under certain circumstances, so there is going to be a bias involved with that. I can agree with that. Okay, I don't know how true it is in reality, but I don't know how far out of his way, being protected by the sort of Israel Defense Force, how much they sort of walked him through just seeing the best parts and hid the worst parts from him. So that is
there's a lot of people who have been to North Korea, and, you know, from their lived experience, you know, it looked like a very thriving place. You know, they were able to, I'm sure you've seen many different versions of this where you're able to kind of cater an experience to somebody to then hopefully elicit an experience and then them writing a certain way about it. I don't know that going to North Korea is the best way to write about everything that's happened there. I think there's a lot of information you can get without experiencing it firsthand. And then
yes, I don't think Murray was doing standpoint theory with that example. I think that's a straw man of his point. His point might still be stupid. As you said, it's a biased walking tour. We don't know exactly what sort of tour they gave him and how much off the beaten path that he went. There's just so much out there. We don't know. But, but he wasn't making the standpoint. I don't think he was making the standpoint theory that people are comparing it to. So I find that
one of Dave's examples is, you know, World War II. Did you have to experience that to write about it, or could you research and write about the atrocities?
Yeah,
and
he makes a joke. Well, I don't think I have a time machine to go back and do that.
Yeah.
He makes a joke
in that 2022 interview or conversation that Douglas Murray has with Lex Friedman. He literally brings that up, that some of the best books on World War II and the experiences that happened there aren't from people who were actually there. They're from historians who are piecing together the evidence afterwards. That seems to refute his exact point of
doing this.
What do you say? Are they writing books about World War II? No. What I was bringing up with this is Dave uses that as a point, like, Okay, so are you saying that like you'd have to actually be a part of World War II, or you would have had to be in those concentration camps to actually talk about them? And then he literally 2 years earlier, perhaps he's changed his position. He brings up literally that same point, that some of the best books that we have on World War II, some of the best research is done after the fact by people who never actually experienced it, which seems to go in the face of him saying, okay, well, if you've dedicated this much time to actually talking about this subject, why haven't you gone there yet? Why haven't you stepped foot on the ground there?
On in the past, though, this is something currently going on that you can go and see how it is in person instead of taking. That is looking back. This is something that's been going on for a few years, recent history. So
only if you're blind to the entire history that went up to this, this is yet the latest iteration of something that has been going on for a long time. Perhaps knowing the history of it would help you, as opposed to just taking this myopic view of what is currently happening. There are certain events that led to everything that's happening.
Isn't accounting for the
he
history.
Didn't mention, hey, have you looked into the history of this? He mentioned, have you been there? So I'm only going off of what Murray said. I don't think that that's fair for you to say that I'm assuming, where it's like, no, he's not explaining. If he thinks that's part of it, cool. He should really add that to what he's saying. Instead, he asked them, have you ever been there?
Okay. And he definitely seems like he tries to clarify that later on, that you don't need to go there. It's just very helpful to understanding this. And it definitely does get derailed with the little joke about World War II. Holocaust. You have to go back to the Holocaust. And I forget whose fault is for that sort of pivot, I would call it. But yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, but I still don't think
I just wanted more information from both sides. If he's not trying to bring up standpoint epistemology, he's doing a really bad job of explaining what it is. Because it's basically, well, have you been there? Have you lived that experience? Is what it sounds like to me. If he's not trying to say that, then I don't think he was effective in his communication.
Oh, I can agree. He's not effective in his communication. I can get it because I understand that perspective. You need to have the context for it. And comparing it to something back in history, of course, anyone nowadays would have to go back through historical records to sort of check that stuff out and make inferences. But nowadays, you can, even with the historical records, you can go there or see how it is instead of taking someone else's secondhand account of it. Just firsthand experience and secondhand experience is different. And in some cases, when it's in the past, you sort of have to go off of secondhand knowledge. And for that particular research method, you need to cross-check certain things. It's about research methodology of how you come to your conclusions. That's a big steel man of Murray in that particular case. So I could be wrong in my reading on that.
I mean, you could bring up a whole bunch of different examples, though. You know, like there's a lot of people who were living in Germany, and they said that these things weren't happening, or they had no idea that these atrocities were happening, yet they were in the actual place. I don't know. I'm not sure if they were putting a blind eye towards it or if it really was that hidden, but I don't know that being on the ground necessarily gave you a better point of view for a lot of the atrocities that are happening pretty much anywhere in the world.
And make you more myopic, okay? It could make you more focused, and that could be the case for it. But he does bring up a couple of facts that sort of get left by the wayside, but we already sort of touched upon that. Ah, freak. Sorry. That was just silence because I was on the wrong copy of it.
Oh, also criticize Hamas because Hamas is as
evil
and as much
better. That's
wrong.
Perhaps
I'm just fucking all around. Okay, this is roughly where we were, I think.
Result of the IDF trying to clear an area which has been very carefully and well booby-trapped for years.
That's important.
Okay.
So remember that a lot of these. no munitions in it when there's just a Hamas commander. Not because there were active missile installations. Okay, that's why I say fuck Israel. And I don't care that the genocide word, whatever. I don't care if someone says they're genocidal. They probably are. They are. Because that's fucking ridiculous. And then most specifically,
what the hell did I got to go back?
Yeah, you might want to go back to the beginning of this thing.
Yeah.
At least if you're going to get to the fuck Israel part of it.
Yeah.
I want to know why he's saying that.
Does he logically get to it throughout this? I don't know.
I think so. He brings up this one atrocity, and he said that's his reason for saying fuck you to him.
Okay, interesting. We're getting into more than just Murray and him with this, but Murray's best point. He's sort of using Murray's best. Okay, just playing it.
So remember that when you see these, Hamas had ammunition and booby trap stuff in a lot of these. It doesn't excuse the fact, of course, that Israel still bombs schools when there are no munitions in it, when there's just a Hamas commander in it. That happened not long ago, where there was a Hamas commander in a school and they bombed the school and killed the children because there's a Hamas commander there. Not because there were active missile installations. Okay, that's why I say fuck Israel. And I don't care the genocide word, whatever. I don't care if someone says they're genocidal. They probably are. They are. Because that's fucking ridiculous. And then most specifically, the 15 paramedics that were executed, then their bodies buried in a mass grave, and then the cell phone footage came out from that convoy that proved that the IDF was lying. Okay? 15 medics.
Jeez, this is Murray's best point, and he's countermanding it to be against Israel. Quite interesting.
Well, his best point was that the way that Hamas is fighting this war isn't like other wars, that they are hiding. I can't remember if this is where he brought up the hostages, that they were transporting them to local residences, and then they were actually keeping munitions inside like schools, churches, things like that, like supposed things that we would keep out of most modern warfare, that it would be against the rules, that it would cause atrocity. So that you're not supposed to go after schools, you're not supposed to go after churches, but they're also not supposed to be present in the fighting or whatever. I believe that was supposed to be Murray's best point, and then he brought up some stuff that supported that, and then he brought up also those 15 journalists that were just completely slaughtered and then completely covered up, and the IDF kind of lied about it. It really sucks. This isn't like other wars, but at the same time, this is a strange area of the world that religion kind of is adding to a lot of what's going on over there. I don't know that we're experiencing
what I'm hearing, Israel has taken extreme measures to evacuate civilians. This might be one of the cases where they failed in that. Okay.
Well, sort of. If you're saying extreme measures are calling the building, saying we're going to blow this up, and then dropping leaflets on top of it saying we're going to blow this up, and then they blow it up. Sure. But Dave Smith's point to that is, okay, and just because you're the state, you don't have some special power to do that. Morally, that's still wrong. If there's somebody inside that building that you need to rescue, you rescue them. If there's somebody inside that building that you need to murder, find a way to get to just them. You can't just blow up that building. Otherwise, in any other way of life, morally, you'd be held responsible for all those innocents dying. But because it's war and it's the state doing it, suddenly this is okay. He views that as morally inconsistent. And that's part of that whole like Rothbardian thing and anti-war thing, is just because the state is saying that they have the power to do this doesn't mean that morally they should be. So you're right. In most wars, they're not dropping papers on the building saying, hey, we're going to bomb this. They just bomb the shit out of it. So they are doing more than most, but are they still doing everything they morally could do to prevent innocents from dying? I don't know that they are.
Probably.
I don't have a better solution for them.
Yeah. They brought up in the debate a couple of things that I don't know the facts on. One, people make, like, I can't support this particular claim. Let's see if he actually gets into it and explains the point, because he seems to be okay. AP
Israel walks back its account of killing 15 medics after video seems to contradict it. Israel claimed that these medics were approaching them without lights. Then the cell phone footage recovered from one of the bodies of the medics came out that they did have their lights on. It's indisputable that Israel is executing medics, lying about it, and the idea that, oh, that's an isolated incident. No, it's not. This has been.
And I think I just called them journalists. I just fucked up. They're medics.
Yeah, it's terminology here, and I mean, I would like to know the other side of this particular instance. But this is just a mess all around. He definitely feels that this is convincing evidence, and I got nothing to sort of counter it. So,
if not fundamentally immoral,
I can see why he's passionate about this.
So I don't like Israel, and I don't like Hamas, and it's a shame that Israel.
You shouldn't like either.
Okay. Here's the other clip that's been going viral.
Gets into the
4.3 million views.
I think this is a better way of doing it. Even if we're cutting this, we get his opinion, and we can judge his opinion on top of our opinions on this.
Sort of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times. There is no deficit? No, there are plenty of. There are plenty. How have you been to the crossing points? No.
He's just going to bring up the same point we are. Let's see his thoughts.
Well, am I not allowed
to talk about
it now? I've never been to. Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them? You can't time travel, but you can. But you can travel. Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like, no, okay. I find that lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you. Yeah, but so if you're going to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
If you're going to spend a year and a half talking about the place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it. Correct. You probably should. Dave Smith would have more credibility had he visited it.
Yeah. More credibility, would get a feel for the people in the land, but
in
it could
what
also
sense of the word? Like, okay, so more credibility in what? He's a comedian that's willing to take on political debates. Like, I don't think that would give him any more credibility. He's still going around and touring the U.S. as a comedian, and then he's willing to take on a whole bunch of different debates. I don't think the fact that he's been to Israel, like, you do understand that Dave Smith is Jewish, right? Like, that's not giving him any extra credibility in here. Just the fact that he would have actually gone to Israel and gone to one of these crossing points, I don't know that that would have necessarily given him any more credibility than he already has. I think those who find him uncredible or
I don't think he has that much credibility to start with, but that's
so I don't. So you're telling me if he went to Israel and went to one of these crossing points into Gaza,
that wouldn't actually matter to me. I'm just saying I don't find it very
who credible. Would this add more credibility to then?
Someone who was more straight-laced and didn't take jokes for a living. Okay. It wouldn't give Dave Smith any more credibility, in my opinion, but that's my opinion. This is Douglas Murray's opinion, and I think it's a bit flawed. I mean, it's not flawed with how he's presenting it. It is flawed with how he's presenting it. You don't need to go there, but he doesn't explain the reasons. And I think that
without it, you don't have that lived experience. If he's not going for standpoint epistemology, I don't know what point he's trying to make here then. That's the way that I took it, but you're saying that you take it some other way.
Viewing
I'm trying to listen
through books, and you tend to imagine things. When you haven't gone to a place, you have to reconstruct everything from your imagination. When it's someplace in the past, that's the only thing you can do. When it's someplace present, it's another point of data that can contribute to your assessment.
So why he brought up how long Dave's been talking about it, that he's been talking about this for a year and a half. Is there a point of time where you're talking about something where then you must actually go there? Otherwise, you're, again, not credible if you're talking about it. How long do you get before you have to actually go back to whatever place?
Again, I don't find David's argument and style credible from the few times I've seen him. Okay, I don't know if it would help him in the end. But it definitely, if someone didn't have the sort of joking sort of personality that even Dave puts out in his debates, the comedy sort of shtick that even Douglas engaged in a couple of times. Okay, so that might hurt Douglas on that front. I'm just saying the credibility for this is two separate issues for me. I wouldn't find him too credible because I've seen a couple of his arguments, and he generally backs down when any serious claim is needed to be made. Why? Douglas Murray will take a hard stand.
So you can't Douglas Murray this. What claim is he back down from, and when is he back down from it? I need some sort of example. You can't just throw that out there. Okay, when has he done that? You said
I
generally.
can throw that out there.
I need a specific.
On
cool. I need a specific. Man.
There. When someone asks him a serious question, okay, who do you say is the woke right? He gives a really vague, mealy mouth thing and say, "Oh,
who asked him this question? In what setting?"
I was Hopla Jesus. Maybe I shouldn't talk out of my ass when I don't have anything to back it up with some people. There's examples that it's just really my thoughts on the matter. I might have examples.
So I've seen Dave Smith have the humility to say, like, I'm not well researched on that particular area. I don't know. I'd have to go look into that, and I can get back to you on it. But I haven't heard him just like back down and be like, you're right. I was talking out of my ass. Hey, I'm just a comedian. I've never heard this type of thing from him. So I'd be interested if you've got a version of that. Cool. The only example that I know of is, again, like on a phoner with Sam Cedar. I want to say it was like 12 years ago. Maybe it's a little bit more, but I haven't seen him back down from
line. Okay. As for a particular thing, I got no example at hand. If I thought we were going to get into this, I would have a clear thing. But let me just... it's a good point you bring up. I did make a claim, and I'll have to look if I have that anything in my notes.
In my opinion, this is a non-argument. Saying you can't talk about something because you haven't been there. This is the equivalent. For those of you, there's a left-wing streamer. His name is Destiny. You may be familiar with him. If someone said to Destiny, if Destiny raised a point that he learned on Wikipedia while playing his video games, having Wikipedia up in the background. If he learned a fact from Wikipedia and then he repeated it to someone, and that person, instead of addressing the fact, said, well, you just sit on your computer all day and read Wikipedia. It's a non-argument. Right? You have to address the point being made. Now, right now, aid is not being let into Gaza. That's the explicit, the Israeli government is saying that. What they're discussing is, has it been a concentration camp level issue since Gaza's been occupied? I think concentration camp, when people say concentration camp, that means like Auschwitz, like death camps. So that term is not good. That's like AOC calling the immigration detention center camps concentration camps. They're
okay. Should I say this is a better example, like a concentration camp? Okay, like a concentration camp. He didn't back down from that. You're right. I got it wrong. Dave Smith made that statement.
And then Douglas Murray kind of challenged him on it. And I was hoping they were going to actually go into that. And that's where I found Murray kind of backing away from the argument, sadly. But he said, so you're saying that it's exactly the same? And he's like, no, I didn't say that. But there's certain aspects. I can't remember exactly what he said. Like either certain elements of it that seem very, they seem similar. I can't remember the exact way that he worded that. And then I was hoping Murray would be like, okay, what are those elements? Like, let's actually get into it. And instead, Murray just kind of sidesteps it and is like, that's ridiculous. I hope he's got the rest of that
they come
here.
Close. I will agree the frustration with that. Murray should have pressed him for more details, but he just lets it move on. I do agree with that. Let's say just like, you're not worth, why not press him on some of these more seriously? Okay, I'm bringing up all these facts. I just denying that they didn't let Murray made a few claims and Smith made a few claims and Murray pressed him on it. And Murray he doesn't back off of it, but but Murray doesn't press down. I agree with that particular criticism of Murray here. He just lets it slide by, especially with the laugh at the very end. I forget what that was pertaining to, but
I think it was, I see similarities between the detainment camps and, like the actual concentration camps, they have similar elements or something like that. And I think that's what he laughs at. Which, fair enough. I'd like to know what he finds laughable about that. Like, what elements are not the same. It really seems like there could have been a decent exchange between the two of them. But again, it doesn't seem like there's
Murray
actually
just
want to
goes
get into the
with
details.
they're not. Murray doesn't really get into it. He just denies what Smith is actually saying. He's like, you're saying they're stopping all this stuff to go through? No. He just denies it and moves on.
They're not, only because they aren't death camps. Is it a brutal occupation? Yes. Is it objectively an apartheid state? Yes. This is a good litmus test for if someone is a Israeli propagandist. It is objectively true that the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza, they don't have a state, correct? Palestine's not a state. This is a number one talking point in Israel. They don't have a state. They don't get to vote in parliament. So they are literally non-citizens, right? They get tried in military courts. They don't get the same rights as Israeli citizens. And they're under Israeli military occupation. That's a definition of an apartheid state. Now, what people say, well, but it's better to be an Arab in Israel than an Arab in Egypt. Sure, probably. It's better to be an Arab citizen in Israel. But there are many Arabs, many Palestinians who have no rights. So, but this argument, I think it says something, that this is the clip that went viral for the pro-Israeli side, and it is a non-argument. It's an effective vibes-based attack. Don't get me wrong.
Vibe-based. Yeah, I agree. If you take it at face value, and maybe it was told in face value. Let's see what this particular point is, because he's going into other things that's beyond it. I don't know if that's fair to do, but maybe he has more knowledge on that particular.
This is my clip that went viral. This is right. So I'm spreading misinformation on X. I used to believe the term the woke right was a ridiculous label. I was wrong. The woke right is real, and Douglas Murray is their leader.
Yeah, a little stupid to say.
Okay, this is literally
Douglas Murray. Again, it's Twitter. It blew up. He got exactly what he was looking to do. When I saw it, I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of views on it. Like, he was closing in on 1 million. He might be close to that now. And it has a lot of interaction on it. Actually, I think I see 1 point something at the bottom. So perhaps he did meet that goal. So I don't know. It got people to not only look at that clip, but it got people to actually like tune into it. Yeah, it looks like he's got over 1 million views on it now. So I don't know. Is it ineffective? It seems to be exactly what Twitter is supposed to be used for.
But is it
well?
is it so it's effective in getting views? But how does that help him? How does that help?
You viewed that statement as not standpoint epistemology. It really seems very similar to that whole, well, have you ever been there? Okay, then you can't speak on that lived experience. I've been there. I don't know, man.
But you didn't go to the steps that you can't speak. He never denied you can't speak. He just, even Jung agreed that it would give him a little bit more credibility to sort of know the environment. As you pointed out,
but he said you've been talking about this for 1.5 years. It seems like I can't remember how he phrased it, but it's
that's more of I think that comes from his sort of journalistic standards he personally has. He does make it clear that something.
What do you mean by journalistic standards?
Like journalists have.
Murray isn't a journalist, though.
He's done journalistic practices at the very least. Okay, he's labeled as an author. Okay.
So Dave has written articles before as well. I don't know that I'd call him a journalist or anything like that.
No.
I know Murray did do like an embedded thing with the Ukraine. I think that was for, I can't remember which publication, but I definitely think he has more journalistic background, but neither of these guys are journalists. Like, they are both commentators. I don't think that,
Cultural
just because
critic,
Dave Smith is
political commentator. The difference is Douglas Murray goes out into the field, interviews people, does more what we would consider serious academic crap. Let's think of what you want of that. Dave Smith does the more online meme. Yeah,
Okay, so what is his online meme?
That's the perception.
So what do you mean by online meme? Could you explain that to me?
Online meme thing. Sorry if I wasn't clear. Telling jokes, conveying ideas in short bursts. Okay. Going with Dave Smith, at least. Okay. Go for more the.
So have you seen any of the debates that Dave Smith has done? He's done a bunch of actual ones, not just online ones, during COVID, you know, like you weren't actually able to go, but I'm blanking on the actual like big forum that they usually hosted in New York. But not only that, but he's done on the ground political stuff where he's not only given speeches at like the Mises Caucus things, but he's also gone and done essentially rallies for them. It seems like he is doing on the ground actual stuff that he can report on his actual experience in these, and he is kind of reporting back to, generally it is his own audience, the goings on that are happening at these political conventions. Like for instance, he was very heavily associated with the Mises Caucus, but it was almost getting taken out by now I'm forgetting what the other caucus was, but they were both fighting for essentially control over the Libertarian Party. He was doing on the ground reporting. He was doing speeches for that. And he was also kind of essentially creating some rallies and trying to get some support behind the Mises Caucus. Not only that, but he's taken up a lot of very public debates, and he's done them like in person. It's not just this online memeing thing. But yes, he does have a bunch of joke clips. He is a comedian as well. That is where he spends most of his time and makes his money. But he thoroughly enjoys politics from a libertarian point of view, and he really wants to spend his time, effort, energy. Theory.
That's not standpoint epistemology. Okay.
What part of that is standpoint? No part of that is you need to have this lived experience.
Yeah, it's coming from a particular perspective. It's a very
he has a philosophy that he abides by, yes, but that no part of that is you haven't had my lived experience, so you can't comment on it. I'm not understanding what part
Murray's
of that is
saying either. Murray's not saying that either.
Have you been there?
Yes, has he been there? Him personally, Murray's own standards. He made it clear that his own standards, and he just. Yeah, he definitely.
What was his purpose of asking if he's been there or not? So what would he have gained if he had been there?
It comes from the rule that Douglas Murray has personally for himself. I think he made it clear there.
I don't think he was clear at all. And that's the problem with this. At the beginning of it, he's saying, hey, you're letting a lot of these non-experts onto your show to give information that I don't agree with, that the experts wouldn't necessarily agree with. They brought up numerous times where, hey, the experts were wrong, and we actually had other
people claim to be experts. That's his biggest mistake. It's other people who try to herald them, not even as experts, but above experts in a lot of cases.
You've got that whole expert issue, whether or not he's saying that they need to be or that they're claiming to be. Either way, he's saying you're letting on non-experts onto your platform. That's irresponsible. And on top of that,
and not
has Dave Smith even been to this area that he's talking about?
Get back and not getting the other side from the experts class. Okay.
But literally, Joe Rogan has done that. He had the actual panel of so not only did he get Dr. Now I'm blanking on his name, but he was there to literally answer for essentially his network, who said that Joe Rogan was taking horse paste. He actually had him on.
Did he do that with Daryl Cooper? Did he get anyone on to sort of get the other perspective on the other side of Daryl Cooper?
Yes, he did. He allowed Douglas Murray to come on and talk about his book. And then he also allowed Dave Smith to come in and talk about both of those. He has had pro-Israel as well as pro-Palestine or anti-war sides on here. Yes,
but is it equal? That's Murray's point. Is it an equal
why would it
amount?
have to be equal? So
it doesn't have to be.
I don't understand.
Murray just thinks it would be better for it to be equally represented.
So what is your takeaway from you don't have actual experts on here, and you don't have, this person has never actually been to the place that they're talking about. What do you see those as
There are
other
two
than
different
gatekeeping
points.
Tactics? Okay. And they both seem to
they
go
are
to
definitely
gatekeeping to
gatekeeping
me.
tactics. I'm not going to deny their gatekeeping tactics. I'm not going to deny that at all. I think even Murray would agree. They are gatekeeping tactics. I'm not going to disagree with you that he's sort of doing a little bit of gatekeeping tactics.
It feels like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, because it's like, okay, so I shouldn't talk about it. He's like, no, you can talk about it, but if you're going to talk about it for a year and a half, I think you should be there. It's like, okay, and what would that
It would be better if he said, if he wanted to represent it on his show properly, Douglas Murray thinks that he should get someone to actually do it. He's not here.
So the next point that Dave Smith brought up was, okay, you were in Ukraine in 2022, I believe, when he was embedded with them. And he wrote one of these articles about the current Ukraine war saying, Ukraine can win this. Trust me, I've been there. And, you know, they haven't yet. So he tries to get press Murray and is like, okay, so you were there. You were actually on the ground and you had this opinion. It was incorrect. So what would actually getting on the ground?
I think Murray said, given the information he had at the time, it seemed like he was incorrect there. I think that was, if I'm remembering that correctly, that's what Murray sort of left.
Yeah, I think he also said something about, like, if they were given the proper funding that they needed, they could have won this war, which fair enough. I mean, I guess you could say if enough money was and weapons were thrown at anything, like, yeah, they probably could have come out on top. But Dave's point was, okay, you were there and you were not correct about the outcome that you saw coming with this. Does that make you change your mind at all about, getting expertise from just being on the ground? I think either way, it feels like a form of gatekeeping. And I guess I just get my cackles up when I hear a bunch of gatekeeping and you shouldn't be platforming these types. I don't know, man. I'm for the free exchange.
I don't feel
ideas.
like that's a correct framing of it. I mean, I understand what you're saying out of both sides of your mouth. That's the way you feel about it. I feel like it's.
I wish he had explained it better.
Okay, I agree. I totally agree. But he took the dismissive tactic. He clearly took the dismissive tactic, the gatekeeping tactic. I think he has good reasons if you look into some of these things, but if it sort of makes it seem really stupid that he didn't come prepared with this. It just gives fuel for Dave Smith supporters and supporters of that sort of edgy, sensationalized ideas where you have to preface it, and people are still going to be like, yeah, the dude's dog whistling. Dog whistling is the weaseliest thing ever. Okay, I do think there are some people who use that as a defense, but I would need particular examples here and there, and that would derail us at the end of the day. And I can't apply it to any of these people because I don't have enough evidence about any of these people, and neither does Dave Smith. Sorry. Fuck.
Yeah, I don't know.
Neither does Douglas Murray.
Apparently.
I'm just seeing sort of the creeping thing. I am trying to steel man Murray. I agree. He did not communicate. People are communicating his ideas better online than himself. And I'm not seeing people. I'm not liking some of this other stuff, but maybe I haven't seen it all. I'm sure I haven't seen it all. I think Jung here, is definitely an opposing force to sort of bounce my idea off of, and definitely more passionate about this than me. So, viral clip of Douglas Murray playing
a woke leftist.
To repeat American foreign policy in the last 40 years, to Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Pearl is knowingly or otherwise to encourage a conspiracy that has very obvious legs. And I just urge you not to do it.
Okay, let me respond to this a little bit. First of all, it is not at all saying that these guys therefore just control everything. I'm just pointing out
Paul Wolfowitz was the Deputy Secretary of Defense under Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. And he had, according to 4-star General Wesley Clark, laid out plans to topple governments in Africa and the Middle East, including Libya, Iraq, various governments. And Dave Smith quoted that And because Paul Wolfowitz has a Jewish last name, you must be anti-Semitic. You're quoting the Deputy Secretary of Defense, who has a Jewish last name. That's kind of racist.
What also seemed general claim.
Really weaselly. The way that Murray kind of stopped him was like, be careful. Some people could interpret the way that you're bringing up just that name in particular as, you're anti-Semitic. It's really strange that it's like, okay, but this guy had this opinion. He was actually in the war room, so I can't bring him up because somebody could possibly take that the wrong way. Again, it's more gatekeeping, which just seems very strange.
I think Murray's point, really which I don't know if it's correct, is that a lot of conspiracy theorists uses this one particular person. And supposedly, since a lot of conspiracy theorists
wouldn't they take that we can't use his name, that we're essentially calling him Voldemort? Like, there was somebody else in the room, but we can't talk about it. Wouldn't they take that just the exact same way? I think
Douglas
either way,
Murray's
they could take something and
argument,
run with
I
it.
believe Douglas Murray's argument is that he believes that this particular person that all the conspiracy theorists are quoting is talking full of shit because he wouldn't have access to the information he would need to I don't know if it's true or not. I believe that's what Murray was trying to get at. He was doubting the credibility of this one particular person. And that would, that seems a little bit weird. Maybe there's something to back it up with, but that basically seems to be his argument and not this Jewish name thing. But I could be misreading it. But maybe I'm Steelman Murray too much again.
Well, Dave Smith isn't bringing it up out of nowhere, and he isn't quoting some non-expert on this. It's literally a 4-star general who was in there who claimed that Wolfowitz was the one who was implementing these plans, or at least suggesting these plans to be implemented. I don't think that at all gets near. It doesn't seem to get anywhere near conspiracy level to me. And then on top of that, I don't know. It feels like you're fueling that fire either way. I think by not saying this name or by saying, well, you can't mention him because of his affiliation with a religion. It's like, really? I think that would just feed the conspiracy fires, but maybe I'm wrong. Again, it feels like Murray is just asking for a whole lot of gatekeeping as opposed to saying, okay, here's why you shouldn't mention him, and then bring up any sort of fact or refute his actual claim here that's coming from this 4-star general.
I mean, I agree about the gatekeeping again. Okay, a certain level of credibility he's placing. It's really hard to tell the credibility, as they brought up earlier in the debate, the credibility of these government experts. If you want to say Murray is going way too far by shooting down almost every hearsay thing David Smith brings up about a government official saying something as not credible. He does shoot down every one of those sort of it would be considered hearsay in some cases or just testimonial, and brings up a lot of examples that I think he thinks are valid, but I don't know if the examples he brings up are more valid. Just talking about things that are provable comparison to what these officials in power are saying. That's just my reading of it. What actually happened? What can be proven compared to what people think based on what these people are saying? Does that make sense? I'm not even saying I agree with Murray doing this. He brings up several things that he empirically claims and rhetorically seems like it seems to be the truth because Dave doesn't back off and he just destroys the credibility of the testimonials from these people in authority. I will agree. He just completely shoots them all down. Pew, pew, pew. Just hearsay. This is what happened.
Yeah,
that's my thoughts on the matter.
I just wish they went deeper into anything, but I do hear what you're trying to say.
We can agree on that.
That does sound like a much stronger version of the way that I was interpreting it. So Fair enough.
Yeah, and I agree.
Yeah, I just wish they
Murray
would get
could
into
have
the
communicated this a lot better. It is frustrating he didn't take this anywhat seriously and went with the gatekeeping, dismissive, you're not worth my time. I'm here to plug my book and listen to you and laugh at your stupid ideas. That's how it came off as. And it's going to piss off a lot of people who... it's definitely going to piss people off. Maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe it's unintended consequence. I don't fucking know on that. But yeah, that's how I see he was doing that there. But again, my reading could be wrong.
And that they ended up being implemented. That doesn't mean that they were the absolute ruler or arbiter of what was going to happen. But again, I got to say, for you to say that I can't bring up the neoconservative...
I never said you couldn't.
Okay, let me just... Right.
I never said you couldn't bring it up. I just think it's weird. I just laughed. I never said you couldn't bring up, you know, race and crime statistics. I just think it's weird that you're doing that because everyone I know who brings up race and crime statistics is a racist. Everyone who I know who talks about, how important immigration policy is to them. Well, you know who else thinks immigration policy is important to them? White nationalists.
Right, but the implication is that I'm unwittingly giving fertile ground to some like Jew-hating conspiracy if I bring up a guy who's got a Jewish last name who was a consequential person in our government. This is like identical to the arguments of the woke left. That would just be like, oh, if you even say so, you know, if you bring up the crime rate in Chicago, you're basically a bigot because other people could take this and run with it.
Come on.
No, you come on. What's the argument?
If you said to me,
I said,
it's obvious.
Before the general said something, and there's no. What's the response?
If you said to me, or somebody said to me, don't you think that some people are running the global financial system? And I said, possibly. And I said, who do you think it is? And they said, the Rothschilds. I think I'd be right in saying there was something a bit off about the character of the person doing that. Because
probably, right? If someone
I find that
how is that analogous to this at all? Like, okay, we didn't have a Rothschild who was in part of the government who was pushing for this to happen. There is an actual dude who has the name Wolfowitz who was trying to implement this plan, who the 4-star general who was in the room is saying, yeah, it came from him. Why is that anywhere close to analogous to saying, you know, there are certain people who run the finances of this country? I don't understand.
Think they're incomparable. I really think they got off on a really weird tangent here. I agree. It's incompatible.
I don't like this whole idea of woke or, you know, using this term as a catch-all for everything. But I feel like a lot of those are those same tactics that people were calling as woke. I have heard this whole idea of the woke right quite a bit. I hadn't seen an example that was like quite as blatant as this, but when you put that part that I'm seeing as standpoint epistemology that you're not, like, have you ever actually been there? Well, if you haven't had a real life experience with this, how could you possibly talk on it? That to me seems like the same thing as this.
One is based.
It feels like a lot of those.
The reason I don't see it that way is standpoint theory is based on one's identity. Given how heavily you engage with your identity, no matter what, going to a particular place has nothing to do with identity. Okay.
What if that lets you identify as an expert?
If you need to be Israeli to talk about Israeli issues, yes, that would be standpoint theory. Saying you could learn more or have more credibility by going to the place and experiencing the physical thing instead of having to do all the mental work recreating a place you've never been to in your head.
But
that's different.
If Murray hadn't previously brought up the identity of an expert and hadn't said that, you know, well, for somebody who's written about this or has talked on this for a year and a half, you didn't think that it would behoove you to go there? Like, it seems like there's, again, this certain expertise that you would get from actually visiting the place. That in conjunction with the expertise thing from before, in conjunction with, well, don't you think that somebody could interpret this the wrong way? And then making this weird analogy that puts it as, you know, this conspiracy that we've all heard of who's financially running the country. To me, it feels like it's so much poisoning the well. It really feels like those same tactics that I've seen come from what was previously dubbed the woke left. To me, when you put all those together, it's like, wow. I can understand why people are saying like the woke right. It does seem to be a lot of these same tactics, but maybe I'm not looking at it charitably enough.
Yeah, maybe I'm just too biased. The woke left tactics are definitely conspiratorial in nature. You know what? White supremacy. Let me think of a better example. Like, we live in a racist, a white supremacist culture. It's baked in. That sounds like a conspiracy theory to me, with little examples like with the 1619 project that sort of pushes that conspiracy along, using these little examples back from the past where they can use people lived experience and reality. What I find Daryl Cooper doing in his research, telling World War II from the Germans' perspective, is how he sort of comes to his sort of framing of, yeah, Churchill is a villain of World War II.
Not fair. He's not doing history from the German perspective.
I've heard him literally say it from the German perspective.
He has done part of his thing from
not like all of it.
You should be able to see section. He's not doing history from the German point of view. That is a section of what he was doing, but he has covered the war from a bunch of different points of views. So I just felt like that was a little bit straw manning, where it's like, you don't think when you're calling him the villain,
but that's still standpoint theory. That's a direct example of standpoint theory. I don't know that that's
so I don't know that that's a better example than this whole expert thing, because apparently from his point of view, from Murray's, if you actually go to the place, it gives you more expertise, and only experts should really be given the platform to talk about this. That also sounds like it is an identity that he is putting forward. That
experts, like if you have people like conspiracy theorists who have these little conspiracy theorists, as a responsible platformer, you should, as someone with a big platform who reaches a lot of people, and I'm not even saying I agree with this, you should have someone to sort of counterman there. And there's sometimes when Joe Rogan has done that in the past, which I respect him for, like with the vaccine guy, he got on someone to counter him. But with someone like Daryl Cooper and maybe the Ian guy, Carol, I think, I don't know if he had anyone to sort of explicitly push back on him. So that's the thing about this. I mean, I understand why you're keep getting hung up on that.
It feels like it's a lot of the same tactics where the goal is gatekeeping, and it's keeping the experts to one side of it, essentially. And if you don't meet their criteria, you really shouldn't be speaking on the matter.
It's trying to pressure Joe Rogan. It's definitely trying to push Joe Rogan to include more pushback to some of the more out there views.
And I've heard that before. That seems like a really cool conversation. I really wish they had that. Instead, it really came off as this weird holier than thou gatekeeping. I don't know what you'd want to call it. Display where at least 3 different versions of gatekeeping were pushed forward. I think it was more, but it feels like it's the expert thing at first, and then again, have you actually been there? And now it's, be careful, conspiracy theorists might think that you're signaling to them, so you can't talk about this issue at all or bring up this person in conjunction with this issue at all. I don't know,
about noticing a pattern. Okay, I've seen many people on the anti-woke side just use the defense. Oh, we see this pattern. We see this pattern. Murray's almost replicating this with what he's seeing with certain people. And he could be incorrect with his reading, and he could be completely off base. I'm not even saying he's correct in his assessment. But yes, this is sort of the critical theory of leftists or the woke left. I have seen that compared to what people are calling the woke right with their conspiracy theories. The comparison has been made. I've seen in discourse, and doesn't surprise me that this would sound very similar. But this sounds...
Usually I disagree with it, but man, in this case, it I don't know. It feels like the biggest examples that I've seen so far, where it's like, well, I don't know. it's hard for me to refute it. That being said, I really don't think that Douglas Murray is a woke dude. From everything that I've seen in the past, he has pushed back on a bunch of shit. He is neoconservative, which I don't necessarily like. A lot of the kind of pro-war stance that a lot of them
I saw
take,
an interview where he tried to deny the neo. Like, I don't understand how the neo part. I'm just a conservative, but I don't reject that label. In one of his interviews. But I watched it. I'm not bringing him
came directly from his book.
Okay.
Yeah. Fair enough. I could be wrong. I want everyone to be able to self-identify. So cool. If he doesn't self-identify as that, I apologize for calling him something that he doesn't think that he is.
At least not currently. Maybe in the past he considered himself one of those. He has on one of those podcasts. He's like, yeah, I've made mistakes when I was younger. I had more hopeful. It could be complete bullshit, a complete cope, but that's what I heard from him.
Because he wrote the book. So because he wrote the book in 2005, neoconservative, why we need neoconservatism, excuse me, why we need it by Douglas Murray. That's why I thought he was a neoconservative. Granted, it's a book published 20 years ago, so in 2005. I know I am not the same person I was in 2005. I don't know if he currently identifies as that. I just I knew that he wrote that book, so I assumed he was neoconservative, but perhaps I made too big of an assumption there.
Oh, that's fair enough. A lot of people do that when they write a book about a particular subject matter.
One is saying Zog constantly.
Oh God!
Right, if someone's constantly making jokes about Zog, as
why are you bringing this
bad, up? Is delusional and pathetic. Think about race and IQ statistics. Okay, it is indisputable that when they fill out the forms, score lower on IQ tests on average. Now that's a fact. That's an indisputable fact. No one disputes this. You can look it up. So Douglas Murray could say, well, anyone who talks about race and IQ stats, it's probably a white. I could infer that they're a white nationalist or racist. You could infer that, and oftentimes you'd be correct because the white nationalists.
But that wouldn't be actually a person. That would be data. Okay. I think this is incompatible. What Jung is bringing up here. That's data. So he's talking about citing a particular person.
But he's saying that the fact that this person brought it up, that is kind of what happened. So Dave is citing a quote of a situation that happened. So some data, if you will. And then he's being told, oh, be careful because, certain people might take that the wrong way because of that person's name. It's weird that just that one name keeps getting brought up. So I don't know, man. It seems
I'm going to have to go back
similar.
And make sure I'm reading that correctly because that wasn't the reading I got. That seemed like something extra Dave Smith added in, but I'm going to have to go back over it because I do plan on getting a little bit deeper with this. I just want to, it's always good to do a stream to get people's thoughts and put your thoughts out beforehand. And this is something worth discussing. I personally think that's why I wanted to set up the stream and get different people on and give my thoughts. They're not going to be perfect, and I might change them later on if I find out something, but you need to look. The best thing about different people's perspective is it gives you can fact check those ideas. If someone makes a claim, you can take a look, see what it is.
For sure.
Go fact check. Is it correct or not? Okay. I always like to test.
For sure. If I'm wrong about anything, I like to be, informed of like, hey, you were wrong in this. I would love to adjust, and I'd love to, mention, hey, this new information was brought to light, and I was incorrect. I got no issue with that. I think you are also the same way. I've seen you change your mind. So I don't know, man. I think we're all open for that. And I've seen both Dave Smith and Douglas Murray kind of change their mind before. I was really hoping they would get together and, perhaps actually work out some of these issues. But I don't think anything was worked out in this.
Happen. No, Douglas Murray, as you said, he is doing gatekeeping techniques. I don't know if he thinks this is the optimum strategy for dealing with what he perceives as a problem within the right wing or centrist sphere. Dave is a libertarian. It's really weird to categorize. They make that joke about the bisexuals, libertarian being the bisexuals. And I can understand what he's talking about. I don't think that really counts with the
Maybe
the particular brand of libertarian Dave is.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if any preference or whatever really maps on correctly to them, but I don't know. I get what they're trying to say by that, but I don't know. Wouldn't that be more centrism? Like you look at both sides. I don't know that Rothbardian necessarily looks at both sides and decides which is less evil.
It's
or
from my
the state
understanding,
is wrong.
it's about taking advantage of the populist sort of sentiment within society and being ahead of the game. Okay, like supposedly they were sort of cozying up with the new left. I don't know if any of this stuff is correct, but I heard the Rothbardians sort of tried to cozy up with the new left movement back in the day, then with the sort of neo paleo conservatives, like
they got in pretty tight with the paleo conservatives for sure for a while. They viewed it as they shared some issues, so they might as well work together. But from what I understand, like Rothbardian are essentially the state doesn't really have a right to exist, and it shouldn't have rights above the actual people. So I don't know that they're really on anyone's side, but they've definitely teamed up with people to try and get more of their ideas out there. I don't know that it's been effective.
Yeah, I think they're accelerationists, whatever radical element that is trying to dissolve the state. What they see is the big bad they'll side with to try to get rid of the state. That's how it feels to me. I don't know if Dave Smith is that particular focused on that particular perspective. The impression I get from him. Again,
I haven't seen him like stress those particular issues. It's mainly just the moral issues of everything, like that the state shouldn't have extra rights than the people have. That seems to be the main focus of it, and then the free markets, which almost every flavor of libertarian is for free markets. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, of course, free markets, the marketplace of ideas. I think Douglas Murray on a different podcast was talking about it unequal. It's a little bit weird seeing Joe Rogan is such a influential figure in general. He feels that he should balance out the views, and I think this was his attempt to do that, and I think it probably isn't going to work out for him. Okay, maybe other discussions around this might get back to Joe Rogan, and he'll be like, okay, Douglas,
but
so cool, but you're sort
again
of with how you did it to me.
It completely exploded on the internet, though. Like every area of politics seems to be talking about this. I've seen it from like the left-wing commentators are all talking about, who won. The right-wing commentators seem to be talking about who won. It's not just in like the libertarian spaces or some niche spaces on the internet. So I don't know. I think this might have sent the wrong message to Rogan that essentially this was very successful. It blew up the internet. I don't know that he will be adjusting for this. It seems to have done what its thing is, but from hearing kind of post interviews with both of them, it seemed like they were both trying to respect Rogan essentially and not turn it into like a debate, not really go at each other that hard, which, man, it led to this weird non-conversation where it seemed like neither side was really engaging.
They were definitely talking past each other entirely and utterly. And I'm pretty much at my limit. Sorry, I am really a low fatigue sort of.
There was two jokes that I really wanted to go through there.
Okay, go.
You said low. Now do I go low T, low IQ? Like, you said low. There's just so many ways to go there.
Low hanging fruit. Great.
Yeah, exactly. It was such low hanging fruit that I didn't know what to go. I had option paralysis there. I did none of them, but I hear what you're saying, man. If you want to have a future conversation about this, cool. I'm totally down. I didn't know exactly what we were going through, so I didn't prepare anything. But I had a couple things that I'd like to talk about in this. Like, I would really, if you haven't seen the Lex Friedman kind of clip where he's talking, Douglas Murray is literally talking about how, some of the best books on World War II were written by people who have never been there. It really seems to go in the face of what he was saying with whatever point he was trying to make about, have you ever been there? Have you had feet on the ground? Have you actually
the
seen
military contractor steelman that pretty effectively about the research method these people. Douglas, Dave Smith, Daryl Cooper, what sort of research do they reach their conclusions to? Okay. What sort of research process they take to get to it? But that wasn't Douglas' point.
But do you know how honest of a picture you're going to be painted in front of you, or you're going to be able to paint if you're literally embedded with the IDF and you're listening to their version of what's happening at these exchange points? I don't know that you're necessarily going to get an unbiased
cultivated experience Murray got in going to these situations. It's definitely a question I want to follow up on. See how outside of the IDF influence he got, because he paints a difference. You don't get a whole sort of picture. There's questions that I think do need to answer. I don't think we're going to get it from either one of these guys, but it did bring up a very important conversation that I've been struggling with trying to answer myself. But this comes back to should YouTubers, for me personally, it comes back, should YouTubers have standards for their content, or should they have no responsibility no matter how big their platform get? Like with side scrollers, they had this whole thing where they had someone from Second Wind come on and sort of like, yeah, don't you think you have any responsibility? Like, we're just guys talking on the internet, but you have influence, okay? Maybe not much, definitely not as much as the gaming industry. They have way more influence, but the sort of alt media space a lot of people are grasping with right now, I think personally, setting this aside, there should be standards. Communities should build for themselves. Like, you want to be in our particular network, because there's a lot of network forming, a lot of network of creators. I'm sure you noticed this yourself, Greg, right?
Yeah.
Networks of creators sort of getting together, promoting each other, growing together, making content together, pivoting together, that sort of thing. But I think for the creator's own sake, they should have limits on how sensationalized, because I'm seeing a lot of people infighting a lot. I think the problem with the infighting is, yes, we'll be with you if you support these particular standards. If you don't, sorry, you broke the rules. Just have the clear rules set out and not make it just into drama when you disagree on something. And in some cases, I'm like, okay, I can understand why you are completely turning against this person, but why didn't you realize this person was like this beforehand? I don't think they do enough research on some of these people and some of the information they push in general thing. It's nothing to do with expertise, nothing to do with credential. My own personal interest in this, just the conversation around, let's have standards for the alt media that is coming up. Take it with a grain of salt, a little bit of skepticism, those sort of ideas. And it's hard to convey those ideas when people don't seem to stand for anything. I'm not even going to get into it right now.
Sorry for talking over you there. So who would get to decide these standards? Who would get to enforce it? And
it would have to be within the community, okay? Like certain rules. We don't want certain things, like mission statements. Websites, businesses, websites, they had mission statements that they were held to. And if they broke these mission statements, ideally, it doesn't happen a lot. A lot of people don't call out a lot of people. There's a lot of hypocrisy out there, double standards. If you make your standards and positions clear from the start, I think that would solve things. But no one wants.
I have reticence with that. I start thinking of like what we went through with Twitter. Well, sort of just like real life experience, I guess, my lived experience. I'm sure you remember your time on Twitter. It seems like it used to be the exact opposite way it is now. Things would get community guidelines struck, and it seemed like if you didn't fit some certain ideology, you could either get your account banned. It wasn't just Twitter. It seemed like Facebook was doing this a ton. In fact, that's why I don't have Facebook anymore. And then same with there was one other big platform that was kind of they all seem to be going towards the same way of censorship. Prior to that, you have like the FCC, which is like this unelected. They just kind of decide their own rules on what the broadcasting standards are. I don't know that necessarily has led to, the greatest things. You can look at all these ridiculous things of what can be said and what can't be said. And I don't know, man. It seems to lead to a lot of unpleasant
you think even establishing rules within networks of creators, having a sort of standard. You think that would
YouTube,
man? Is that a slippery slope to it?
Yes, there's a very slippery slope. And just like YouTube, for instance, how many times do we have to sidestep around a certain issue? Like we've got to use flowery words to describe something that we normally could describe very easily, but we know that word will automatically get someone demonetized or unfavorable, unrecommended to somebody. It'll get something flagged. So instead we have to talk about like in Minecraft or in Roblox or whatever caveat we need to add to language or, use these alternate phrasings so as to not alarm somebody. But you can generally still get the message across. I don't know that necessarily helps.
You're talking about top-down rules, the platform rules. I'm talking about for if a certain community wants to actually gather a certain amount of respect and have certain code of conduct within people. I'm just thinking a lot of people, they just don't sort of have any pride in what they do. They throw information out there.
Well, pride's a sin.
I'm not the biggest religious guy in the world. But yeah, I'm just seeing a lot of this sort of jelly man style. And I'm not going to say Douglas Murray perfectly sort of think he highlighted some of those things badly, because people can follow up and steel man him. And it's a little bit lazy, frankly, for him pushing his book. Maybe he wanted some of the sensationalism from this. And he knew, I don't fucking
He did get Donald Trump to, do a little tweet about his book the next day. So maybe it did lead to, I hope it leads to success for him, but I hope that, he's able to kind of take a look at this conversation, realize it wasn't the most successful, and I hope he's able to make much more successful conversations in the future, because I like hearing what both of these guys have to say.
Well, it would be nice.
I understand you only like one of them, but fair enough.
I don't like anyone, okay? I side only with Murray because he's bringing up a particular topic that I'm having trouble putting into words. Because it does feel like a jelly man with some of these people out there. They don't seem to take positions on anything. They just attack other positions that seem to help one side or another. They won't make a stand. But that could be my own life experience that makes me view these people this way. I don't know. Plug yourself, Gray.
Yeah, I was going to launch a show on Sunday because, 420 Easter, that sounds like a great day to launch a show. And then my wife ended up breaking her leg. My grandma ended up breaking her hip and then dying. So, I've taken a little bit of time off. I'm just figuring everything out. The weekend that I was going to spend getting like all the musical cues and the video intros ready, that happened to be when my grandma took a turn for the worse. So
I've kind of just been that, man.
Oh, thanks. It's good. She was 92. She lived a great life. She was a super happy person, but just kind of had a little bad experience towards the end. But it's a bad note on a great life, but still, it's a new day. So anyway, I'm taking a little bit more time. So new show will be launching sometime in May, probably towards the beginning of it. So if that sounds interesting.
What's the idea behind it?
Oh, well, I'm Grey Poupée. I am the entertainment condiment. So yeah, it's gonna be entertainment. No politics. It should be pretty entertainment focused. But yeah, it's gonna be a lot of talk about like movies, TV shows, and such. I'm having a couple of guests on each week, and then I have them kind of introduce themselves to the audience through some pop culture kind of games, if you will. But yeah, it should be a bunch of fun, hopefully, in the future, if I haven't destroyed myself by making appearances like this. So yeah, if this sounds great to you, please come on over to the channel. New content up soon. If you just can't get enough of me, every Thursday night on That Darn Kidda's channel, YouTube at That Darn Kidda, the thinkers get together. It's people from like 4 different countries getting together, disagreeing about everything. Usually it's kind of a political topic or something in pop culture as well. I know tomorrow we happen to be talking about objective criticism and specifically this show that wouldn't go away on Netflix that's called Adolescence. And it's kind of talking about toxic masculinity and a whole bunch of culture, but we're talking about the criticism of it. So if that sounds interesting, come join us tomorrow night on YouTube at That Darn Kidda for the thinkers. That's all I got going on. What about you, Vincent? What do you have going on in the future, sir?
Oh, I am completely dying. I'm completely, I myself have a lot of things I want to do. I'm thinking of actually taking a break from this analyzing YouTubers and doing some more satirical work. I found a good anime that I thought I could spoof with some really bad criticism. I want to make it over the top. I miss awesome. Doing satirical work. Okay. Just like
satire is great.
Like take the, I used to do it so much. I got into this sort of analyzing media, and that includes YouTube videos, people saying, no, I just want to do some old school. I found this cool anime, but let me tear it to piece with bad criticism. I think that's a good idea. That's probably analyzing this a little bit. I really think this is a good flashpoint. I'm hoping some discourse is coming out of this. I don't think it's going to come from Doug or David. I don't have a lot of hope, but maybe some other people who are more lively and more willing to have good faith discussions and think about very fact-based versus more rhetorical takes will take an interest in it. Who the hell knows how that's going to go? What I'm going to decide on. This is just a small dive into that. That's about it. That's all I got to say on that.
Well, yeah. Thanks for letting me join you on this, man. I appreciate it. And again, sorry I was late.
Well, not a problem. Have a good night, everyone. Peace out. Bye-bye.